My sister-in-law hated my allergic son so much, she left out peanut butter snacks in front of him because she was hungry. When I got angry, she sarcastically asked, "Well, did anything happen to him?" I wasn't even going to react until she tried it again without me present. I reported her and fast forward to today. Police called to notify me that they found a map of our home and gasoline in her trunk. My kids are freakishly obsessed with my brother and his pregnant wife, Megan. They were on speakerphone when they called asking to stay over for a week, and my kids immediately started clapping their hands. Please say yes, Mommy. I had no idea she was planning on unaliving my son. So I smiled and told them to come over whenever. Everything was smooth sailing until Megan came home with groceries, cookies, crackers, cake fusion, all filled with peanuts. It immediately made my skin crawl. You see, my oldest son is extremely allergic, like can't breathe, vomiting, life-threatening allergic. And we learned that the hard way a few years back when we almost lost him. Oh, thanks. But my son is extremely allergic, and I'm not too comfortable with having this stuff in the house. But instead of apologizing or immediately throwing them away, she just said she wouldn't eat it around him because she was having intense, gnawing pregnancy cravings that she needed to satiate. I wanted to scream, but instead I settled for making sure my son knew not to touch any of it. And that was that until a week later. I woke up early to make breakfast for the entire house. But as I opened the fridge, I felt the blood drain from my face. Because sitting right there on the second shelf was a plate of strawberries dipped in peanut butter, left out without a container. And as my eyes jolted to the left, I spotted sandwiches that were practically drenched in peanut butter, too. I was seething. This wasn't just my home, it was my son's, too. So without hesitation, I grabbed a bin bag to throw everything into and got ready to donate it to a homeless shelter. Megan walked into the kitchen as soon as I got ready to walk out. "What the F do you think you're doing with my food?" I bluntly told her to shut the F up because my son's life was worth endlessly more than any craving she could ever have. She didn't have a response right away, so I took the opportunity to leave and call my brother. "Well, did anything happen to your son?" he asked slowly, like I was too dumb to understand. I just hung up and called my husband, who was thankfully even angrier than me. When I got home, my house was filled with almost every member of my family. My mom, my stepdad, my brother, Megan, my husband, and even my aunt. I guess she figured my mom would take her side. But when I arrived, everyone was giving out to her. Even my brother was trying to get her to understand. It ended with my brother and Megan packing up their stuff and him apologizing on her behalf. After that, I was pretty much ready to never have anything to do with her ever again. But my brother had other plans, because almost every day he was texting and leaving voicemails about how inconsolable she is, about how I owed her a second chance. I didn't trust myself to speak calmly. So instead, my husband contacted him and told him to F off. Well, kind of. He told him I had cleaned the entire house and almost had an anxiety attack. They shut up after that. And to avoid being rude, when I had finally calmed down, I texted them, too. I simply informed them that we'll be going low contact until we feel ready to be around them again. My message was left on read and life fell back into routine again, and I made sure to vet anyone and everyone that came over. I still regret picking up the phone when Megan called a few weeks later, but curiosity got the better of me. She was choking on sobs, apologizing for what she'd done. By the end of it, I actually felt like we could work on our relationship. She also mentioned that she would still like for my family and I to come to her birthday dinner. It wasn't going to happen in a restaurant anymore, and that it was going to be at their house instead. My husband left the choice to me. Well, she had never acted like that before, and I know what pregnancy hormones are like, so I believed her. Fast forward to the big day. "Where are your kids?" was the first thing she asked. I ignored the sharpness of her tone and simply told her that it's just us adults tonight. She looked at me like I'd let her down. Dinner was awkward, no matter how we tried to lighten up the mood. "It's such a shame your kids aren't here, because we made special food for them," she constantly remarked. My instincts started buzzing, but again, I just bit my tongue and smiled politely. After that, dinner was even more awkward until we cleared the table, and Megan brought out dessert while my brother got the cake from the fridge. That's when I lost the last of my remaining brain cells. I went to the bathroom, and when I came out, I saw my husband carrying my bag and trying to usher me out of the front door to leave. He looked angry, like really angry. I was extremely confused and pushed past him to say goodbye. Megan's now ready dessert table consisted of peanut butter cake pops, peanut butter pie, peanut butter cookies, peanut butter brownies, and top it all off, a peanut butter birthday cake that my brother brought in and was sniffing at with a horrified look. Megan then gave me a big smile and said loudly to my family, "I thought I should at least get to have my cravings on my birthday." Get your fill before she throws these out, too. I immediately lost it. The dining room had been transformed in my absence. Where there had been empty space before, now stood a lavish display of desserts, all in various shades of tan and brown, all glistening with the unmistakable texture of peanut butter. The smell hit me immediately, that distinctive nutty aroma that had become a warning signal in our household. Each dessert was artfully arranged and decorated with care, suggesting hours of preparation. My brother stood frozen by the refrigerator, the cake in his hands, his expression a mixture of shock and dawning horror as he realized what his wife had done. But it was Megan's face that chilled me to the bone. Her smile was triumphant, her eyes gleaming with satisfaction as she watched my reaction. This wasn't about pregnancy cravings. This was deliberate. This was revenge. I immediately lost it. I knew we would make it through this, all of us together. But life rarely follows the path you expect. The rage that exploded inside me was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. It was primal, protective, and all-consuming. "Are you out of your mind?" I screamed, my voice shattering the tense silence. "You know about my son's allergy. You know this could call him." My entire body was shaking, tears of fury springing to my eyes as I gestured wildly at the deadly display. "This isn't about cravings. This is sick. What kind of person does this?" My husband grabbed my arm, trying to pull me toward the door, but I was too enraged to move. "You invited us here? Invited my children here to surround them with something that could send them to the hospital?" My brother had set down the cake and was standing between me and Megan, his face ashen with shock and shame. "I didn't know." He kept repeating, "I swear I didn't know she was planning this." 3 months into our arrangement with Lily, things started getting complicated. My brother was spending more and more time at our house, often staying for dinner and helping with Lily's bedtime routine. It was nice seeing him bond with his daughter, but I could tell he was struggling with the whole situation. The transition hadn't been easy for any of us. After the peanut butter birthday incident, everything had happened so quickly. Megan's breakdown in the restaurant parking lot when we tried to leave. The police involvement when she followed us home. Screaming accusations. The emergency psychiatric evaluation that revealed she was suffering from more than just pregnancy hormones. A dangerous combination of untreated mental illness exacerbated by the stress of pregnancy. Then came the court orders, the supervised visits, and finally the temporary custody arrangement that placed baby Lily primarily with my brother, with us providing childcare while he worked. Our home had transformed to accommodate a newborn again. The portable crib in our bedroom, the changing table wedged into the corner of the living room, the bottles and formula and tiny clothes scattered everywhere. My kids had adapted remarkably well, especially my oldest son, who seemed to take special pride in being a protective cousin to little Lily. He would read to her every night, his voice soft and gentle as he showed her the pictures in his favorite books, careful to keep her tiny fingers from tearing the pages. "I visited Megan yesterday," he told me one night after we'd put Lily down. "Her doctors say she's stabilizing on the new medication, but she still has these episodes." We were sitting at the kitchen table, the house finally quiet after the chaos of dinner and bedtime routines. The soft hum of the baby monitor created a background soundtrack to our conversation. My brother looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, his shoulders slumped with the weight of everything that had happened. I pushed a mug of tea toward him, wishing there was something more substantial I could offer to ease his burden. "What kind of episodes?" I asked, washing bottles at the sink. The warm, soapy water swirled around my hands as I carefully scrubbed each bottle part, making sure no formula residue remained that could harbor bacteria. The repetitive motion was soothing, giving me something physical to focus on while processing my brother's words. Through the kitchen window, I could see the reflection of our concerned faces, ghostly images superimposed over the darkness outside. He rubbed his face tiredly. She gets fixated on you. Says, you're trying to steal her baby and her husband. Says, you planned this whole thing. His voice cracked slightly on the last sentence, and I turned from the sink to look at him directly. The kitchen light cast harsh shadows across his face, emphasizing how much weight he'd lost in the past months. The brother, who had always been the family jokester, the one with the ready smile and easy laugh, now looked like a shell of himself. The unfairness of it all, that he was caught between his mentally ill wife and his innocent daughter, made my heart ache. A chill ran down my spine. Even locked away in a psychiatric facility, Megan was still obsessing over me. I felt goosebumps rise on my arms despite the warmth of the kitchen. The bottle in my hands nearly slipped as I imagined Megan in her hospital room, plotting and planning. Her mind twisting reality into something unrecognizable. I remembered the calculated look in her eyes at the birthday dinner. The satisfaction as she revealed her peanut butter trap that hadn't been impulsive. It had been premeditated, carefully designed to cause maximum hurt. The thought that she was now focusing that same calculated malice on creating elaborate conspiracy theories about me was deeply unsettling. You don't believe that, right? Right? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Of course not, he said quickly. I know what's real now. I've seen it with my own eyes. He reached across the table and grabbed my hand, his grip firm and reassuring. I was blind before, he continued. His voice stronger now. I made excuses for her behavior, blamed it on the pregnancy, on stress, on anything but her. I couldn't see what was right in front of me. He glanced toward the ceiling in the direction of the bedroom where his daughter slept peacefully. But Lily deserves better than that. She deserves the truth, even if it's painful. And the truth is, Megan is sick in a way that medication might not fully fix. 2 weeks later, I got a call from Dr. Patel, Megan's psychiatrist. She wanted to meet with me and my brother to discuss Megan's treatment plan. Apparently, Megan had been asking for family therapy sessions as part of her recovery. Dr. Patel's voice was professional but warm as she explained the situation. Megan has been making progress in individual therapy, she said, and she feels ready to begin addressing some of the family dynamics. I sat at the kitchen counter, phone pressed to my ear, absently watching my children playing in the backyard through the window. Lily was napping in her portable crib in the living room, her tiny chest rising and falling with each breath. The normalcy of the scene contrasted sharply with the conversation I was having. I don't think that's a good idea, I told my husband that night, being in the same room with her after everything she's done. We were getting ready for bed, the familiar routine of brushing teeth and changing into pajamas, providing a comforting structure to end the day. My husband paused while folding back the comforter, looking at me with concern in his eyes. The bedside lamp cast a warm glow across our room, creating a cozy atmosphere that belied the seriousness of our conversation. You don't have to do it, he said, squeezing my shoulder. No one would blame you for keeping your distance. His touch was reassuring, his palm warm against my skin through the thin fabric of my nightshirt. I leaned into his hand, grateful for his unwavering support throughout this entire ordeal. He had been my rock, stepping up with the kids when I was overwhelmed, taking over Lily's care when I needed a break, never once complaining about the upheaval our lives had undergone. But my brother was desperate for some kind of resolution. Please, he begged when he called the next day. Dr. Patel thinks it might help her recovery. Just one session, his voice over the phone was pleading. A note of desperation that tugged at my heart despite my reservations. I could picture him pacing in his apartment, phone clutched tightly, hoping I would agree. He had lost so much already. His marriage, his home, his vision of what his family would be. How could I deny him this chance at some kind of healing, however small? Against my better judgment, I agreed to one meeting. My husband thought I was crazy, but I couldn't help feeling a tiny bit of sympathy for Megan. Mental illness is a terrible thing, and postpartum psychosis isn't something anyone chooses. The morning of the meeting, I stood in front of my closet, staring blankly at my clothes, unsure what one wears to meet with someone who had deliberately endangered your child. I settled on a simple blue sweater and jeans, neutral, unremarkable, nothing that could be interpreted as provocative or judgmental. My husband kissed me goodbye at the door, his eyes worried. "Call me if you need anything," he said. "I can be there in 20 minutes." I nodded, grateful for the safety net, and headed to my car with a knot of anxiety tightening in my stomach. The psychiatric facility was depressing, all beige walls and squeaky linoleum floors. Dr. Patel met us in a small conference room, explaining that Megan would join us shortly. The antiseptic smell hit me as soon as I walked through the security doors. That distinctive hospital scent of disinfectant mixed with institutional food and medication. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a harsh glow that made everyone look slightly ill. A staff member led us down a corridor where patients in loose-fitting clothes shuffled past, some making eye contact, others lost in their own worlds. The conference room was sparse, just a rectangular table surrounded by uncomfortable plastic chairs, a box of tissues placed strategically in the center. My brother sat beside me, his leg bouncing nervously under the table. "She's made significant progress," Dr. Patel explained, "but she still has a lot of work to do before we can consider outpatient treatment." Dr. Patel was a petite woman with kind eyes behind stylish glasses, her dark hair pulled back in a neat bun. She spoke with a slight accent, her voice calm and measured as she prepared us for what to expect. "Megan has been working hard on recognizing her thought distortions," she explained, flipping through notes on her clipboard. "She understands now that some of her perceptions were not based in reality." I nodded, trying to appear open-minded while my stomach turned with anxiety. My brother reached over and squeezed my hand briefly. A silent thank you for being there. When Megan walked in, I barely recognized her. Her hair was dull and pulled back in a messy ponytail. She'd lost weight and her eyes had a vacant quality that made me uncomfortable. The vibrant, confident woman who had stood proudly displaying her peanut butter dessert table was gone. This Megan moved hesitantly, her hospital-issued slippers shuffling across the linoleum floor. The pregnancy glow had been replaced by a pallid complexion, her cheekbones too prominent in her thin face. She wore no makeup, and without it, she looked younger, more vulnerable. Her hands trembled slightly as she pulled out her chair, the plastic bracelet on her wrist sliding up and down her too thin arm. "Thank you for coming," she said softly, taking a seat across from me. Her voice was barely above a whisper, lacking the sharp edge I'd grown accustomed to. She kept her eyes downcast, focusing on her hands, which were clasped tightly together on the table. My brother made a small movement beside me, as if he wanted to reach out to her, but thought better of it. The air in the room felt thick with unspoken emotions. Regret, fear, anger, confusion, all swirling around us in the sterile conference room. The session started awkwardly. Dr. Patel guided the conversation, asking Megan to express her feelings about the current situation. To my surprise, Megan seemed genuinely remorseful. "I wasn't well," she said, staring at her hands. "I'm still not completely well, but I'm starting to understand what I did, and I'm so sorry." Her fingers twisted together as she spoke, her nails bitten down to the quick. A tear slipped down her cheek, followed by another, but she made no move to wipe them away. The fluorescent lights highlighted the dark circles under her eyes, the chapped quality of her lips. Part of me wanted to maintain my anger, to hold on to the protective rage that had sustained me through the past months, but seeing her like this made it difficult. She looked up at me with tears in her eyes. "I put your son in danger. I tried to hurt you. I can't even explain why. It was like someone else was controlling me." Her gaze met mine directly, for the first time. Her eyes red-rimmed, but clear. There was no hint of the calculation I'd seen before. No underlying current of resentment or malice. Just raw pain and what appeared to be genuine remorse. I felt my throat tighten with unexpected emotion. Dr. Patel quietly passed the box of tissues across the table, and Megan pulled one out, dabbing at her eyes before continuing. I nodded stiffly, not trusting myself to speak. My emotions were a tangled mess, sympathy warring with lingering anger, caution battling with hope. I could feel my brother watching me, gauging my reaction, desperate for some sign that healing was possible. Dr. Patel sat with her pen poised over her notepad, her expression neutral but attentive. The clock on the wall ticked loudly in the silence, marking the seconds as they stretched between us. "And now you're taking care of my baby," she continued, her voice cracking. "After everything I did to you, you're a better person than I could ever be." She gestured helplessly, her thin shoulders hunching forward as a sob escaped her. "Lily deserves someone like you in her life, someone stable and kind and normal." The raw honesty in her voice was disarming. This wasn't the calculated manipulation I'd come to expect from her. This seemed like genuine self-awareness, painful and unvarnished. My brother reached across the table toward her, stopping just short of touching her hand. "We're all trying to do what's best for Lily," he said gently, "including you, by getting help." By the end of the session, I felt emotionally drained, but somewhat hopeful. Maybe Megan really was getting better. Maybe someday, we could actually have a normal family relationship. The hour had passed more quickly than I expected, filled with difficult conversations about boundaries, expectations, and the long road of recovery ahead. Dr. Patel had skillfully guided us through potential landmines, stepping in when emotions ran high, encouraging honest communication without allowing blame to dominate. By the time we reached the end, the atmosphere in the room had shifted from tense to cautiously optimistic. My brother looked more relaxed than I'd seen him in months, some of the perpetual worry easing from his face. Dr. Patel seemed pleased with how things went. "This is excellent progress," she said. "Megan, would you like to say anything else before we end?" She closed her notebook and placed her pen down, signaling that our official session was drawing to a close. Megan straightened in her chair, smoothing her hands over her hospital-issued pants. She seemed to gather herself, taking a deep breath before speaking. The transformation was subtle but noticeable. A slight squaring of her shoulders, a more focused quality to her gaze. Megan looked directly at me. "I just want to know how Lily is doing. Is she happy?" The question hung in the air between us, simple, yet loaded with meaning. This was the heart of it all. Not the conflict between us adults, but the well-being of the innocent baby caught in the middle. I saw a genuine maternal concern in Megan's expression, a flicker of the mother she might have been under different circumstances. It was the most normal, healthy reaction I'd seen from her. Something in her voice made me uneasy, but I pushed the feeling aside. There was a slight intensity to her question that triggered a warning bell deep in my subconscious, but I dismissed it as my own lingering distrust. After all, it was perfectly natural for a mother to want to know about her child's happiness. I was being hypervigilant, seeing threats where there were none. Or so I told myself. "She's doing great. She's starting to smile a lot, especially at her cousins." My oldest son reads to her every night. I pulled out my phone, scrolling to a recent photo of Lily and her bouncer. Her tiny face lit up with a gummy smile as my son made silly faces at her. It was a sweet moment I captured just yesterday, evidence of the loving environment we were providing. I held the phone toward Megan, offering this small connection to her daughter's daily life. A strange expression crossed Megan's face at the mention of my son, but it disappeared so quickly, I thought I might have imagined it. For just a fraction of a second, something dark flickered behind her eyes, a tightening around her mouth, a hardening of her gaze, but it vanished almost instantly, replaced by a tremulous smile as she looked at the photo of her daughter. My brother didn't seem to notice. His attention focused on the picture of Lily, his expression softening with paternal pride. Dr. Patel was making a note in her file, her head bent over her clipboard. I was the only one who had seen it. That momentary slip in Megan's carefully constructed facade of recovery. As we were leaving, Megan asked if she could hug me. I hesitated, but allowed it. Her arms were bony, and she held on a hit too long. The embrace was awkward. Her body felt fragile against mine. All sharp angles and hollow spaces where the pregnancy curves had been. Her hospital gown was rough against my cheek, and I could smell the institutional shampoo in her hair. What should have been a quick, polite hug extended uncomfortably as she clung to me, her fingers digging slightly into my back. I patted her shoulder gently, trying to signal an end to the contact. "Thank you for taking such good care of my family," she whispered in my ear. Something about the way she said it sent goosebumps down my arms. Her breath was warm against my ear, her voice so low that only I could hear the words. There was a possessive quality to her tone when she said, "My family." Not grateful, but entitled, as if she were granting me temporary permission to care for what belonged to her. I pulled back, meeting her eyes, searching for some confirmation of what I'd heard in her voice. But her expression was once again meek and appreciative, her eyes downcast, her posture submissive. Had I imagined it? Was I so determined to see the worst in her that I was manufacturing threats? On the drive home, my brother was quiet, processing everything. I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The car's heater hummed softly as we navigated the afternoon traffic, the gray winter sky hanging low overhead. My brother stared out the passenger window, his breath occasionally fogging the glass. "She seems better, don't you think?" he finally asked, his voice hopeful but uncertain. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, choosing my words carefully. "She's definitely different," I replied, which wasn't exactly an answer. I didn't want to crush his optimism, but I couldn't shake the uneasiness that had settled in my stomach after that whispered comment, that fleeting, dark expression. My instincts were screaming caution, but I had no concrete evidence to justify my concerns. Just a feeling, a momentary glimpse behind a mask. Was that enough reason to doubt Megan's recovery? Or was I being unfair, unable to believe that someone who had hurt us could genuinely change? A week later, Megan started calling our house. At first, it was just to talk to my brother when he was over, which seemed reasonable. Then, she asked to speak to Lily, which was odd since Lily was only 4 months old and couldn't exactly have a phone conversation. I would hold the phone near Lily while Megan cooed and baby talked. The first few calls seemed innocent enough. Megan asking about Lily's day, singing little songs to her, making the gentle nonsense sounds that parents use with infants. I would cradle the phone near Lily's ear, watching as the baby's eyes widened at the sound of her mother's voice. Sometimes Lily would gurgle or coo in response, and Megan would gasp with delight on the other end of the line. These moments felt normal, healthy, even a mother connecting with her child despite difficult circumstances. My brother would watch these phone calls with a mixture of sadness and hope, his expression softening whenever Lily seemed to respond to Megan's voice. Then she started calling when my brother wasn't there, asking detailed questions about Lily's routine, what she ate, when she slept, who held her. Again, not completely unreasonable for a mother separated from her baby. But something about it made me uncomfortable. The calls began coming at predictable times. During Lily's morning bottle, before her afternoon nap, right after her evening bath, Megan would ask increasingly specific questions. What temperature is her formula? Which side of the crib does she prefer? Does she still startle at loud noises? Who picked out that yellow onesie she's wearing? Some questions seemed innocent enough, but the sheer volume and specificity began to feel intrusive, as if Megan was cataloging every detail of Lily's life without actually being present for it. More concerning were the questions about who was caring for Lily, how often my oldest son held her, whether my husband gave her bottles, if my mother had visited. The focus on who had access to Lily set off warning bells in my mind. "She's just trying to stay connected," my brother explained when I mentioned it. Dr. Patel says it's important for her recovery. We were standing in the kitchen, Lily asleep in her swing nearby, the gentle mechanical whirring providing background noise to our conversation. My brother looked better than he had in weeks. He'd gained back some weight. The perpetual worry lines around his eyes had softened. He was invested in Megan's recovery, clinging to each sign of improvement like a lifeline. I didn't want to take that hope away from him, but I couldn't ignore the growing knot of unease in my stomach. I tried to be understanding. Really, I did. Then the gifts started arriving. The first package arrived on a Monday morning, a beautifully wrapped box with a silver bow and a card addressed to Lily. Inside was a delicate pink dress with matching booties, clearly expensive and exactly Lily's size. "For my beautiful girl. All my love, Mommy," the card read. It seemed like a sweet gesture, a way for Megan to participate in her daughter's life from a distance. My brother was touched, carefully hanging the dress in Lily's closet for a special occasion. First, it was just baby clothes and toys for Lily, which was fine. Then, Megan sent presents for my kids: expensive video games, trendy sneakers, things I knew my brother couldn't really afford on his salary. The packages increased in frequency and expanded in scope. A limited edition of the video game my middle child had mentioned wanting, the exact brand of basketball shoes my youngest had seen in a commercial, art supplies for my daughter that were professional grade and must have cost a small fortune. Each gift was perfectly targeted to the recipient's interests, suggesting Megan had been paying very close attention during her time in our home, or that she was getting detailed information from someone. The gifts always came with handwritten notes expressing gratitude for helping with Lily, signed with flourishing hearts and smiley faces. On the surface, it seemed generous, thoughtful even, but the extravagance felt excessive, almost like a bribe. "She's just grateful to your family," he said when I questioned it. "Let her do this." My brother's defense of Megan was becoming automatic, a reflexive response to any concern I raised. We were standing in the living room, surrounded by the latest delivery, 3 large boxes containing gifts for each of my children. "But how is she affording all this?" I pressed, gesturing at the expensive items. "She's in a psychiatric facility. She doesn't have income right now." He shifted uncomfortably, avoiding my gaze. "She had some savings," he muttered, though he didn't sound entirely convinced himself. I wanted to push further to make him see how strange this sudden generosity was. But the relief in his eyes at this apparent sign of Megan's recovery made me hold my tongue. He needed to believe she was getting better. The most unsettling gift arrived on a Tuesday. A large box addressed to my oldest son. Inside was a custom-made teddy bear wearing a medical alert bracelet identical to my son's, along with a jar of honey and a note that read, "Honey is so much better than peanut butter, don't you think? Love, Aunt Megan." The box sat open on our kitchen counter, its contents displayed like evidence at a crime scene. The teddy bear's glassy eyes stared blankly upward, its plush arms sporting a red fabric band that mimicked my son's medical alert bracelet with disturbing accuracy, right down to the specific wording about his peanut allergy. The jar of honey gleamed amber in the kitchen light, innocent looking on its own, but sinister in context. My son stood beside me, his expression confused and uneasy as he read the note again. "Why would she send this?" he asked, his voice small. "Is she still mad about the peanut butter?" I put my arm around his shoulders, feeling him tense under my touch. "No, honey," I lied, trying to keep my voice steady. "I think she's just trying to be nice in her own way." But we both knew that wasn't true. This wasn't a gift. It was a message. Megan hadn't forgotten anything. I immediately called Dr. Patel, who assured me she would address it in Megan's next session, but the damage was done. My son was confused and upset by the gift, and I was furious. The phone felt slippery in my palm as I paced the backyard, trying to keep my voice down so my son wouldn't hear my conversation with Dr. Patel. "This isn't appropriate," I insisted, my words coming out in a rush. "She's deliberately referencing the peanut incident. She's targeting my son specifically." Dr. Patel's voice remained professionally calm on the other end, but I detected a note of concern breaking through her composed exterior. "I agree this is concerning," she admitted. "Megan hasn't mentioned any gift sending in our sessions. I'll address this immediately and adjust her communication privileges if necessary." After hanging up, I stood in the yard for several minutes trying to calm my racing heart. The afternoon sun felt too bright. The normality of the neighborhood around me, children playing, someone mowing a lawn, birds chirping at odds with the dread pooling in my stomach. "This has to stop," I told my brother. "She's still fixated on the peanut thing. It's not healthy." We were sitting at my kitchen table late that night after all the children were in bed. The teddy bear and honey had been removed from the house, hidden away in the garage until I could decide what to do with them. My brother looked exhausted, the brief period of optimism following our visit to the facility now completely erased. He ran his hands through his hair, leaving it standing up in disheveled spikes. "I'll talk to her," he promised, his voice hollow, and to Dr. Patel. Maybe this is just a setback." I reached across the table and squeezed his hand, feeling a surge of sympathy despite my anger. He was caught in an impossible situation, torn between the mother of his child and the safety of his family. It's not your fault, I told him gently, but we need to be realistic about what's happening here. He agreed to talk to her, but the gifts kept coming, each one slightly more inappropriate than the last. A cookbook titled Allergy Free Baking, with all the peanutry recipes highlighted in yellow, a set of kitchen towels embroidered with bees and honey pots, a custom doormat that read, No nuts allowed, that showed up on our porch one morning. Each new delivery felt like a violation, an unwelcome reminder that Megan was thinking about us, specifically about my son's allergy, with disturbing regularity. The cookbook arrived in a cheerful yellow gift bag with tissue paper, looking innocent enough until I flipped through it and found every peanut-free recipe marked with neon highlighter. Megan's handwriting in the margins, noting which ones the allergic one might enjoy. The bee-themed kitchen towels came next, 3 of them neatly folded in a box with a card that read, Be careful what you eat, with a winking emoji. The doormat was the most brazen, delivered by a custom gift company whose confused driver had no idea of the context behind the seemingly innocuous message. Each item on its own might have seemed thoughtful to an outsider, a considerate acknowledgement of a family member's medical condition, but I knew better. These weren't gifts, they were taunts. I started returning the packages unopened, which only escalated things. Megan began calling at all hours, sometimes just breathing on the line when I answered. My brother insisted she was still recovering, that we needed to be patient. The phone would ring at 2 a.m., 4 a.m. during dinner, in the middle of my children's homework time. Sometimes when I answered, there would be a click and then silence. Other times I could hear breathing on the other end, steady and deliberate, but no words. Occasionally, Megan would speak, her voice syrupy sweet, asking about Lily, about my children, about what we'd had for dinner that night. The calls left me feeling watched, as if she could somehow see into our home. I started unplugging the landline at night, screening all calls through voicemail during the day. My brother looked increasingly haggarded as the situation deteriorated, caught between defending Megan to me and trying to set boundaries with her that she repeatedly ignored. Then came the day my brother found Megan's journal. He was going through her belongings at their apartment preparing to move out when he discovered a small leather-bound book hidden in her nightstand. Inside were entries dating from before her hospitalization. The apartment still held the remnants of their life together. Furniture they'd picked out as a couple. Photos on the walls from happier times. The nursery they'd painted together in anticipation of Lily's arrival. My brother had been putting off the final clearing out, finding excuses to delay the painful task of dismantling what remained of his marriage. But with the lease ending, he couldn't postpone it any longer. He'd asked me to help, and we were working our way through the bedroom, sorting items into boxes labeled Keep, Donate, and Storage. When he pulled open the nightstand drawer and found the journal tucked beneath a stack of magazines, the first few pages were normal enough, Megan writing about her pregnancy, her hopes for the baby. Then the entries took a dark turn. The journal's leather cover was soft with use, the pages filled with Megan's distinctive handwriting, looping and precise. The early entries were what you'd expect from an expectant mother. Excitement about ultrasound appointments, lists of potential baby names, plans for the nursery. There were pressed flowers from her baby shower, a corner of the sonogram taped to one page, swatches of fabric she was considering for the crib bedding. But as we continued reading, the tone shifted subtly at first, then dramatically. The loving anticipation gave way to something darker, more obsessive, and my name began appearing with increasing frequency. She thinks she's so perfect with her perfect family and her perfect house. She doesn't deserve any of it. The words leapt off the page, written with such pressure that the pen had nearly torn through the paper. My brother's face palled as he read the entry, dated just after their week-long stay at our house. The handwriting here was different, more jagged. The letters pressed deeply into the paper. Some words underlined multiple times for emphasis. The page contained a detailed list of perceived slights I had supposedly committed. Everything from the way I parented my children to how I'd organized my kitchen cabinets. It was a catalog of resentment so petty and yet so intense that it took my breath away. If something happened to her allergic brat, no one would blame me. Accidents happen all the time. This entry made my blood run cold. The explicit threat against my son, written in calm, measured handwriting, as if Megan were simply noting a grocery list rather than contemplating harm to a child. It was dated 2 days before she brought the peanut-laden groceries into our home. This wasn't impulsive behavior or a misunderstanding about the severity of allergies. It was calculated, intentional. She had been planning it for days. My hands began to shake as the full implication hit me. She had deliberately brought those foods into our home, hoping my son would have a reaction. When the baby comes, I'll have leverage. Everyone will have to do what I want, or they'll never see my child. The entry was accompanied by a crude drawing of a woman holding a baby, surrounded by stick figures reaching toward them with exaggerated, sad faces. The woman in the drawing had a crown on her head and a speech bubble that read, "My rules now." It was childish and disturbing, revealing a mindset that viewed her unborn child not as a person to love, but as a tool for control and manipulation. My brother made a choked sound as he read this page, his face contorting with a mixture of horror and grief. "She was planning this all along," he whispered, his voice breaking. "Using our baby as a weapon." My brother's hands were shaking when he showed me the journal. The last entry was dated just before Megan's hospitalization. "They're all against me now, even my own husband. But I'll get my baby back, and then I'll make her pay for turning everyone against me. I know exactly how to do it." The final page was the most disturbing of all. The writing erratic and pressed so hard into the paper that it had torn in places. There were doodles in the margins, small stick figures with X's for eyes, crude drawings of what looked like an EpiPen with a circle and slash through it, a house with flames coming from the windows. Next to my name, she had drawn a small coffin. The explicit threat was chilling enough, but the calculated nature of it, the detailed planning, the sustained focus on causing harm, was what truly terrified me. This wasn't just mental illness. This was something darker, more deliberate. I called my husband immediately, and my brother took photos of every page before bringing the journal to Dr. Patel. My fingers fumbled with the phone as I dialed, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. When my husband answered, I could barely form coherent sentences, the words tumbling out in a panicked rush as I tried to explain what we'd found. "We need to increase security," he said immediately, his voice calm but urgent. "I'm coming home now." Meanwhile, my brother was methodically photographing each page of the journal, his movements mechanical, his face blank with shock. "Dr. Patel needs to see this," he kept repeating as if trying to convince himself that professional intervention could somehow make sense of the horror we'd uncovered. "This can't be real," he said, his face pale. "She wouldn't. She couldn't." He sat heavily on the edge of the bed, the journal open in his hands, staring down at the pages as if willing them to transform into something less horrifying. The bedroom around us, once a space he had shared with Megan, now felt tainted. Every object a potential hiding place for more secrets, more evidence of the darkness that had been growing right beside him while he slept. "I lived with her," he said, his voice hollow with disbelief. "I slept next to her every night. How did I not see this? There was no answer I could give that would ease his pain. No explanation that could make sense of Megan's calculated malice. All I could do was sit beside him, my hand on his shoulder, as he confronted the devastating truth about the mother of his child. "You know it's real," I said gently. "This isn't just mental illness. There's something else going on with Megan." The words hung in the air between us, heavy with implication. Mental illness might explain some of Megan's behavior. The mood swings, the paranoia, the distorted thinking. But the journal revealed something beyond illness. A deliberate, sustained intent to cause harm, a calculated targeting of my son's vulnerability, a cold exploitation of her own child as leverage. These weren't the ramblings of someone disconnected from reality. They were the plans of someone who knew exactly what she was doing and why. My brother closed the journal slowly, his movements weighted with resignation. He understood what I was saying, even if he couldn't bring himself to acknowledge it aloud. Megan's actions weren't just symptoms to be treated, they were choices she had made. Again and again, he left without saying another word. I didn't hear from him for 3 days. When he finally called, he sounded exhausted. Those 3 days of silence were agonizing. I called and texted repeatedly, increasingly worried about his mental state after the shock of discovering the journal. My husband suggested giving him space to process, but I couldn't shake the fear that he might do something drastic. I drove by his apartment several times, relieved to see his car in the parking lot, but concerned when he didn't answer his door. On the third day, just as I was considering calling the police for a wellness check, my phone finally rang. His voice on the other end was barely recognizable, flat, drained of all emotion, as if he'd cried himself empty and had nothing left. I showed Dr. Patel the journal, he said. They're adjusting her treatment plan. She won't be eligible for release anytime soon. There was a finality in his tone that suggested more than just a medical decision had been made. This wasn't just about Megan's treatment. It was about my brother accepting a painful truth. The future he had imagined, his family healing, Megan recovering, perhaps even rebuilding some version of their life together, had been irrevocably shattered by the reality documented in those journal pages. Dr. Patel had confirmed what we already knew. Megan's issues went beyond postpartum psychosis or temporary mental health crisis. There was something fundamentally broken in her relationship with reality, with empathy, with basic human connection. I felt relieved, but only temporarily, because 2 weeks later, Megan escaped from the psychiatric facility. Those 2 weeks had been almost normal. A brief rest bit after months of tension. My brother had started therapy, working through his grief and guilt with a counselor specializing in traumatic relationships. Lily was thriving, recently mastering the art of rolling over and delighting everyone with her infectious giggles. My son's anxiety about the gifts had begun to fade, and he was sleeping through the night again. We had started to believe that maybe, just maybe, the worst was behind us. Then came the middle of the night phone call that shattered our fragile sense of security. The call came at 3 a.m. My brother was frantic. She's gone. Somehow she got out during shift change. No one knows where she is. The shrill ring of the phone had jolted me from deep sleep. My husband sitting up beside me in confusion as I fumbled for the receiver in the darkness. My brother's voice was high-pitched with panic, words tumbling out so quickly I could barely understand him at first, as the meaning of his message penetrated my sleep-fogged brain. I felt a cold wave of adrenaline wash through me, instantly alert. When? I demanded, already swinging my legs over the side of the bed, reaching for clothes in the dark. About an hour ago, he replied, his breathing ragged as if he'd been running. They just called me. They're searching the grounds. But she's just gone. We called the police immediately. They took a report, but didn't seem overly concerned. Most patients return on their own within 24 hours. The officer told us she has no money, no transportation. The officer who responded was young, his expression professionally sympathetic, but slightly dismissive as he jotted notes in his pad. He stood in our living room, declining the offer to sit, clearly viewing this as a routine matter rather than the emergency it was. We'll put out a B, he assured us, using the police acronym for Be on the Lookout. But in these cases, patients usually don't get far. They get cold, hungry, disoriented, and either return voluntarily or are found nearby. He didn't understand, couldn't understand what we knew about Megan. That she wasn't just any patient, that she had a target, that she had plans, but I knew better. Megan was resourceful, and she was fixated on getting to Lily and possibly hurting my son in the process. I thought about the journal entries, the detailed planning, the sustained focus on revenge. Megan wasn't someone who acted on impulse. She calculated, she prepared, she waited for the right moment. The fact that she had managed to escape during a shift change suggested planning and observation of the facility's routines. This wasn't a confused patient wandering away. This was a deliberate action with a specific goal. And given what we knew about her fixations, that goal almost certainly involved Lily, and possibly my son as well. We went into lockdown mode. My husband took time off work to stay home. We kept the kids out of school. We installed new locks and a security system. My brother moved in temporarily, sleeping on our couch and jumping at every noise. Our home transformed overnight into a fortress. My husband installed additional deadbolts on every exterior door, while I covered first floor windows with security film that would make them harder to break. We established a buddy system. No one went anywhere alone, not even to check the mail or take out the trash. The children were confused and frightened by the sudden restrictions, especially when we tried to explain why they couldn't go to school or play outside. Is the bad lady coming back? My youngest asked, his small face serious as he helped my husband test the new alarm system. We're just being extra careful, I replied, not wanting to terrify him, but needing him to understand the importance of our new safety rules. At night, we took turns keeping watch, sleeping in shifts, the house never completely dark, someone always alert and listening. 3 tense days passed with no sign of Megan. The police checked her usual haunts, talked to her friends, but found nothing. I was starting to think maybe she'd gone somewhere else entirely when my phone pinged with a text from an unknown number. The sound of the notification made me jump, nearly dropping the laundry basket I was carrying. I sat it down on the hallway floor and pulled out my phone, expecting a message from school about the children's missed days, or perhaps an update from the police. Instead, the words on the screen made my blood freeze in my veins. I see you've redecorated my nursery. Don't worry. I'll fix it when I come home. I nearly dropped the phone. She was watching our house. The police traced the text to a burner phone purchased at a convenience store about a mile from our home. Security footage showed Megan buying the phone along with hair dye and a baseball cap. She looked nothing like the fragile woman I'd seen in the psychiatric facility. She looked determined, focused. The security footage was grainy, but unmistakable. Megan stood at the counter of the convenience store, cash in hand, her posture confident and relaxed. Gone was the hunched, uncertain body language of the hospital. She moved with purpose, chatting casually with the clerk as she made her purchases. She dyed her hair a dark brown and wore it pulled back under a plain baseball cap, but her face was clearly visible when she glanced up at the security camera, almost as if she wanted to be seen, wanted us to know she was functioning perfectly well outside the facility walls. The officer showing us the footage pointed out other items she'd purchased: a prepaid debit card, a large bottle of water, a map of the local area. She's planning to stay nearby, he concluded, his tone now appropriately serious, and she wants you to know it. We decided to set a trap. With the police on board, we made a show of packing up the car, loading the kids, and Lily inside. My brother drove them to my mom's house while I stayed behind, hidden with 2 officers stationed outside. The plan was carefully orchestrated, designed to create the impression that the house would be empty for several hours. We made sure to be visible through the front windows as we packed overnight bags, loaded them conspicuously into the car, and had loud conversations about visiting my mother. My brother strapped Lily into her car seat with deliberate slowness, making sure anyone watching would see the baby leaving. The children briefed on their roles, but not on the real danger. Played along perfectly, excitedly climbing into the vehicle with their backpacks and favorite stuffed animals. Once they departed, I slipped back inside through the garage entrance where I wouldn't be visible from the street. 2 plain-clothes officers positioned themselves in unmarked cars with clear views of our property, while 2 more waited in a van down the block, ready to respond at the first sign of Megan. Sure enough, less than an hour after they left, I heard a noise at the back door. Through the security camera feed on my phone, I watched as Megan tried each window, testing for one left unlocked. She was wearing a blonde wig and sunglasses, but it was definitely her. The security app on my phone showed multiple camera views simultaneously, allowing me to track Megan's methodical circuit of our house. She moved with surprising stealth, staying close to the walls, pausing frequently to listen. She tried the back door first, jiggling the handle gently, then moved to each ground floor window in turn. Her movements were practiced, patient, not the frantic actions of someone in a psychotic episode, but the calculated approach of someone with a plan. I texted updates to the officers outside, my fingers shaking slightly on the screen as I watched this woman who had threatened my family trying to break into our home. When she found the bathroom window unlatched, deliberately left that way as part of the trap. She climbed inside. I texted the officers, then hid in the master bedroom closet as we'd planned. The bathroom window was small, designed more for ventilation than access, but Megan was thin enough to squeeze through with surprising agility. On my phone screen, I watched her leg appear first, then her torso. Finally, her head as she lowered herself quietly onto the bathroom floor. She paused there, listening intently, then slowly opened the bathroom door and peered into the hallway. I sent one final text to the officers. "She's inside." Then silenced my phone completely and retreated deeper into the master bedroom closet. The space was dark and cramped, hanging clothes brushing against my face as I crouched behind a laundry hamper. The closet door was left slightly ajar, giving me a narrow view of the bedroom while keeping me hidden in the shadows. I could hear her moving through the house, calling softly for Lily. When she reached the nursery and found it empty, she let out a sound that was half sob, half scream. Her footsteps were light but distinct on the hardwood floors, moving from room to room with increasing speed as she discovered each one empty. When she reached Lily's nursery, the room my brother had been using while staying with us, I heard drawers being pulled open, closet doors sliding, the sound of bedding being disturbed. Then came that terrible cry, a sound of pure anguish and rage that raised the hair on the back of my neck. It wasn't the cry of a mother missing her child. It was the howl of a predator denied its prey. "Where is she?" she yelled, her voice echoing through the empty house. "Where's my baby?" The control in her voice had vanished, replaced by raw fury. I heard something crash, likely the small lamp on the nursery dresser being knocked to the floor. Then, more sounds of destruction. The thud of furniture being overturned, the crack of something breaking, the tearing of fabric. Megan was destroying the nursery in her rage, obliterating the carefully prepared space where her daughter had been sleeping. The sounds were terrifying, but I remained frozen in my hiding place, knowing the officers would be moving into position, waiting for the right moment to enter without putting anyone at risk. I held my breath as her footsteps came closer to my hiding spot. She was opening doors, checking rooms. When she reached the master bedroom, I could hear her rummaging through drawers, muttering to herself. From my position in the closet, I could see a slice of the bedroom through the partially opened door. Megan appeared in my limited field of vision, yanking open dresser drawers and emptying their contents onto the floor. She was talking continuously under her breath, a stream of invective and accusation that chilled me to the bone. "Think you can hide her from me? My baby? My family? Turn everyone against me. Think you're so perfect?" Her movements were jerky but purposeful as she systematically searched the room, checking under the bed, behind the curtains, inside the bathroom. She was working her way methodically toward the closet where I hid, her voice growing louder, more agitated with each passing second. Then, the closet door flew open, and there she was. Her eyes widened in surprise, then narrowed with hatred. The sudden flood of light as the door swung wide momentarily blinded me. When my vision cleared, Megan was standing in the doorway, her disguise partially abandoned. The blonde wig askew, sunglasses pushed up on her head, revealing her true hair, which had been roughly chopped short. Her face was thinner than I remembered, her cheekbones sharp beneath skin, stretched tight with tension. But it was her eyes that truly frightened me. Pupils dilated, gaze intense and burning, with a hatred so pure it seemed to radiate heat. For a split second, we stared at each other in mutual shock. The hunter and the hunted roles suddenly reversed from what she had expected. "You? Sheeses. You took everything from me." Her voice was low and venomous, dripping with a rage that had clearly been festering for months. She stood blocking the closet doorway, her body tense and coiled like a spring. I pressed myself further back against the wall, searching desperately for something to use as a weapon, finding nothing but soft fabrics and shoeboxes within reach. Through the bedroom window, I could see no sign of the police officers who were supposed to be watching the house. Had they not seen her enter? Were they waiting for some signal I hadn't given? My heart hammered against my ribs as I realized I might be truly alone with this woman who had made her murderous intentions perfectly clear. Before I could respond, she lunged at me. hands outstretched toward my throat. We fell backward into the hanging clothes, struggling against each other. She was surprisingly strong for someone who'd been hospitalized for months. The impact knocked the breath from my lungs as we crashed into the hanging garments, sending shoes and boxes tumbling around us. Megan's fingers found my throat with unerring precision, squeezing with a strength born of pure hatred. Spots danced at the edges of my vision as I clawed at her hands, trying to break her grip. The closet was too confined for effective movement, the fallen clothes creating a treacherous surface that offered no traction. I thrashed beneath her, panic giving way to a cold clarity as I realized this was a fight for my life. Her face above mine was transformed by rage. All traces of the meek hospital patient completely vanished. This was Megan's true face, the one she had hidden from everyone but revealed in the pages of her journal. Megan, stop. I gasped as her fingers dug into my neck. The police are outside. I managed to get the words out between desperate gasps for air, hoping to shock her into hesitation. Her grip loosened fractionally, not from fear, but from contempt. Her lips curled into a sneer as she leaned closer, her breath hot against my face, her weight pressing me deeper into the pile of fallen clothes. "Liar!" she screamed. "You're always lying. You turned everyone against me." Spittle flew from her lips as she shouted, her face contorted with fury just inches from mine. Her fingers tightened again around my throat, thumbs pressing into my windpipe with deliberate pressure. The edges of my vision began to darken, oxygen deprivation making my limbs feel heavy and unresponsive. Where were the police? Had they not heard her screams? In that moment of desperation, I realized I couldn't wait for rescue. I had to save myself. I managed to knee her in the stomach, giving me just enough space to roll away. I scrambled toward the bedroom door, but she grabbed my ankle, pulling me back. The blow connected solidly, driving into her midsection with enough force to make her gasp and loosen her grip momentarily. I twisted away from her, lunging toward the closet door on hands and knees, feeling the carpet burn against my palms as I scrambled for freedom. I had almost reached the bedroom doorway when her hand closed around my ankle like a vice, yanking me backward with surprising strength. My chin hit the carpet hard, teeth clacking together painfully as she dragged me back toward her. I kicked wildly with my free leg, connecting with nothing but air as she pulled me closer, her nails digging into my skin through my sock. "I'm gonna finish what I started," she hissed. "First you, then your brat of a son. He should have eaten those peanut butter cookies I left out. It would have looked like an accident." Her words were like ice water in my veins, cutting through the panic and replacing it with a cold, clarifying rage. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about my child, my son, whose life she had deliberately endangered, whose vulnerability she had targeted with calculated malice. The maternal instinct to protect surged through me like an electric current, washing away fear and replacing it with a strength I didn't know I possessed. In that moment, hearing her admit she deliberately tried to harm my child, something in me snapped. I twisted around and punched her square in the face. She fell back, stunned, blood streaming from her nose. My fist connected with her face with a sickening crunch, pain shooting up my arm from the impact. Megan's head snapped back, her grip on my ankle instantly releasing as she fell backward. Blood gushed from her nose, spattering across her shirt and the carpet beneath her. She looked shocked, one hand rising to touch her face with disbelief, as if she couldn't comprehend that I had fought back. For a moment, we stared at each other, knee half lying on the floor, breathing hard, my hand throbbing, her sitting stunned, blood streaming down her face. The reality of her situation finally beginning to register in her eyes. That's when the police burst in, tackling Megan to the ground as she screamed and fought. It took both officers to handcuff her and drag her out of the house. The bedroom door crashed open with a bang that made both of us jump. Two officers rushed in, weapons drawn, shouting commands that seemed to come from very far away. My ears were ringing, adrenaline making everything seem slightly unreal as I watched them secure Megan, who had begun fighting with renewed vigor. She thrashed and bucked against their restraining hands, her screams becoming increasingly incoherent as they managed to get handcuffs on her wrists. Blood from her nose smeared across her face and the officers' uniforms as they lifted her to her feet. One officer stayed with me, asking questions I could barely process, while the others half carried, half dragged Megan from the room. Her screams echoed through the house, head gradually fading as they took her outside to the waiting police car. As they put her in the police car, she locked eyes with me one last time. "This isn't over," she mouthed silently, and somehow I knew she was right. I stood on the front porch, a blanket wrapped around my shoulders by a concerned paramedic who was examining the bruises forming on my throat. Megan sat in the back of the police cruiser, her face visible through the window as they prepared to drive her away. Despite the blood, despite the handcuffs, despite her capture, there was no defeat in her expression, only a cold determination that sent a shiver down my spine. As the car pulled away, I knew with absolute certainty that this was merely a pause in Megan's campaign against my family, not its conclusion. Whatever mental illness she suffered from had become intertwined with a focused personal vendetta that transcended her circumstances. She would find a way to continue her revenge, even from behind bars. Megan was charged with breaking and entering, assault, and attempted kidnapping. Given her mental state, she was deemed unfit to stand trial and was committed to a high-security psychiatric facility. My brother filed for divorce and permanent custody of Lily. The legal proceedings moved with surprising speed, accelerated by the clear danger Megan posed and the overwhelming evidence against her. The journal alone provided enough documentation of her intentions to convince even the most skeptical judge. My brother sat through each hearing with stoic determination, his face a mask of composure that only cracked when he returned to our home each evening. Then, away from the public eye, he would sometimes break down, the full weight of his shattered marriage and the danger to his daughter finally overwhelming his carefully maintained facade. I would sit with him during these moments, offering silent support as he grieved the future he had once imagined, and came to terms with the reality he now faced. For a while, things were quiet. Too quiet. I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, jumping every time the phone rang, or there was an unexpected knock at the door. The silence felt oppressive, rather than peaceful. Each day that passed without incident only increased my anxiety. Like the stillness before a storm, I found myself checking and rechecking the locks, testing the security system multiple times a day, scanning the street for unfamiliar cars or faces. Sleep became elusive. My nights punctuated by startling awake at the slightest sound, heart racing, convinced that somehow Megan had found a way back into our lives. My husband tried to reassure me, pointing out the security measures we'd taken, the legal barriers now in place, but he didn't fully understand the depth of my certainty that Megan wasn't finished with us. I had seen it in her eyes. That final promise mouthed through the police car window. This wasn't over. 6 months passed. Lily was thriving, growing into a happy, chubby baby who adored her cousins and had my brother wrapped around her little finger. He'd found a small apartment nearby and was getting back on his feet, though Lily still spent most days with us while he worked. Watching Lily develop brought joy back into our home. She had started crawling, a determined army-style commando crawl that could get her across a room with surprising speed. Her first tooth had appeared, followed quickly by a second, her proud grin showing off the tiny white nubs whenever she smiled. My children doted on her, including her in their games, reading her stories, arguing good-naturedly over whose turn it was to feed her. My oldest son was especially protective, keeping a watchful eye on her during playtime, making sure she didn't put anything dangerous in her mouth. My brother visited every evening after work, his face lighting up when Lily squealed with delight at his arrival. Slowly, gradually, we were building a new normal, a family reshaped by trauma, but healing together. I was just starting to relax when the letters began arriving. Not at our house. Megan wasn't allowed to contact us directly. Instead, they went to my workplace, my children's school, our neighbors, local businesses. Anonymous letters claiming I was abusing Lily, that I had a history of violence, that I was mentally unstable. The first letter appeared in my work mailbox, a plain white envelope with no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper, the text printed in a generic font to avoid handwriting identification. Did you know the woman caring for baby Lily Jones has violent tendencies? Ask her about attacking a pregnant woman. My hands shook as I read it, immediately recognizing Megan's twisted version of our confrontation. The next day, my son's teacher called me aside at pickup, awkwardly showing me a similar letter that had been sent to the school. Then came the calls from neighbors, from the children's pediatrician, from the local grocery store where we shopped weekly. Each letter contained slightly different accusations, all designed to cast doubt on my character and suggest I was a danger to Lily. Some people ignored them, others gave us strange looks. A few called Child Protective Services, who had to investigate each claim, no matter how ridiculous. The investigations were humiliating, even though most people who knew us dismissed the letters immediately. A social worker named Tamara came to our home, apologetic but professional, as she explained that they were required to follow up on every report concerning a child's welfare. She interviewed each family member separately, inspected our home, checked Lily for any signs of neglect or abuse. Finding nothing but a well-cared-for baby in a loving environment, she closed the case quickly. But the damage was done. The seed of suspicion had been planted in our community. I noticed parents at school pickup keeping their distance, conversations at the supermarket becoming stilted and brief. The letters had achieved their purpose, isolating us, marking us as somehow suspect. Tamara, our original caseworker, assured us she knew the claims were bogus, but she still had to follow protocol. She sat at our kitchen table, her file open before her, expression sympathetic as she explained the situation. "I know these allegations are false," she said, accepting the cup of coffee I offered. "But each new report requires a new investigation. It's the law." She was a kind woman in her 50s with salt and pepper hair and eyes that had seen too much genuine child suffering to be fooled by Megan's false reports. "The good news," she continued, "is that with each investigation finding no evidence of wrongdoing, any future claims from the same source will be viewed with increasing skepticism." She hesitated, then added more quietly, "The pattern of reports itself is becoming evidence, not against you, but against whoever is filing them." How was she doing this from a locked facility? I asked my brother in frustration after the third CPS visit in a month. We were sitting on the back porch, watching through the sliding glass door as my children played with Lily on a blanket spread across the living room floor. The baby was attempting to stack plastic rings on a cone, her tiny face scrunched in concentration while my kids cheered each clumsy effort. The scene was so normal, so peaceful, that the contrast with our conversation felt almost surreal. How could something so innocent be at the center of such malevolence? He shook his head. "I don't know. Maybe she has help on the outside." My brother looked troubled, running a hand through his hair in a gesture that had become habitual during times of stress. The thought hadn't occurred to me before, that Megan might have an accomplice, someone who believed her twisted version of events and was willing to act on her behalf. The idea was disturbing. Expanding the threat from a contained individual to an unknown network. Who would help someone target a family this way? Who would participate in a campaign against a baby's caregivers? That thought was even more disturbing. Who would help Megan torment us? I felt a chill run through me as I considered the possibilities. A fellow patient she had manipulated, a staff member at the facility who had fallen for her lies, or someone from her past who shared her distorted view of reality. The not knowing was almost worse than the harassment itself. The feeling that we were being watched, targeted by someone we couldn't identify or protect ourselves against. I found myself studying faces at the grocery store, analyzing the expressions of delivery people, wondering if each stranger who glanced our way might be the one carrying out Megan's vendetta. We got our answer a week later when Megan's mother showed up at our door. I'd only met her once at Megan and my brother's wedding. She was a stern woman with the same sharp features as her daughter. The doorbell rang during Lily's afternoon nap. Through the security camera we'd installed, I saw a woman in her 60s standing on our porch, her posture rigid, her expression severe. It took me a moment to place her, to connect this face with the mother of the bride I briefly met years ago. Megan's resemblance to her was striking. The same high cheekbones, the same thin-lipped mouth, the same calculating eyes. I hesitated before opening the door, instinctively checking that the security chain was engaged before turning the lock. "I want to see my granddaughter," she demanded without preamble. She stood on her front porch, impeccably dressed in an expensive-looking pantsuit, her silver hair styled in a severe bob that framed her face. Her tone was imperious, entitled, as if she were a queen demanding tribute rather than a grandmother requesting a visit. There was no greeting, no acknowledgement of the unusual circumstances, no recognition of the harm her daughter had caused our family, just a demand issued with the expectation of immediate compliance. I stood firmly in the doorway. "I'm sorry, but that's not possible right now. My brother has full custody, and he's not here." The security chain remained in place, creating a barrier between us that seemed to irritate her further. Her eyes narrowed as she assessed me, gaze sweeping from my face to my casual home clothes, making me acutely aware of my messy ponytail and the baby food stain on my shirt sleeve. I resisted the urge to smooth my hair or explain the stain, refusing to be intimidated by her obvious disapproval. Her eyes narrowed. "Megan told me what you did to her, how you've turned everyone against her and stolen her baby." The accusation was delivered with such conviction that for a moment I was speechless. The parallel to Megan's delusions was striking. The same narrative of victimhood, the same casting of me as the villain, the same inability to acknowledge reality. It was as if I were speaking to Megan herself, just an older version. The realization sent a chill down my spine. This wasn't just a concerned grandmother. This was the source of Megan's distorted worldview, the original template for her daughter's manipulation tactics. "That's not what happened," I said, trying to stay calm. "Megan is very ill. She needs help." I kept my voice level, aware that escalating the situation would only reinforce her narrative of me as the aggressor. Behind me, I could hear Lily beginning to stir from her nap, making the soft cooing sounds that usually preceded full wakefulness. I shifted slightly, blocking more of the doorway, instinctively moving to protect the baby from this woman who shared blood with her, but who clearly shared Megan's distorted perception of reality as well. "The only sick person here is you," she snapped. "Megan warned me about you. Said, you'd try to poison me against her too." Her voice rose with each word, color flooding her cheeks as her composure began to crack. The resemblance to Megan in the midst of one of her rages was uncanny. The same pattern of escalation, the same inability to process contradictory information, the same quick leap to anger when challenged. I could see now where Megan had learned these behaviors, how they had been modeled for her throughout her formative years. The realization was both illuminating and deeply disturbing. I realized then where Megan had learned her manipulation tactics. The apple hadn't fallen far from the tree. It was like watching the origin story of Megan's dysfunction play out before my eyes. The same entitled anger, the same refusal to acknowledge reality, the same quickness to cast others as villains in her narrative. This wasn't just a personality quirk or a reaction to stress. This was a generational pattern, a taught and learned way of engaging with the world. Megan hadn't developed her manipulative tactics in isolation. She had absorbed them from this woman who now stood on my porch, demanding access to the next generation. The thought of Lily being exposed to this toxic dynamic, potentially becoming the third generation in this pattern, strengthened my resolve to protect her. "I think you should leave," I said, starting to close the door. I kept my voice firm but calm, refusing to provide the emotional reaction she seemed to be seeking. Behind me, Lily's coos had turned to more insistent sounds, signaling she was fully awake and would soon be calling for attention. I needed to end this confrontation quickly before it could escalate further or disturb the baby. My hand tightened on the door, ready to close it, regardless of her response. She stuck her foot in the jam. I filed for grandparents' rights. I'll be seeing Lily one way or another, and when I do, I'll make sure she knows exactly what kind of monster her aunt is. Her foot wedged firmly against the closing door, her body leaning forward aggressively into the narrow opening. Her threat was delivered with such venom that spittle flew from her lips, landing on the chain that separated us. The naked hostility and her expression confirmed everything I had suspected. This woman wasn't interested in Lily's welfare. She was interested in continuing Megan's campaign of harassment and manipulation, using the baby as her weapon of choice. After she left, I called my brother in a panic. He was furious but not surprised. Her mom's always been toxic, he explained. It's where Megan gets it from. Don't worry, she has no legal standing for grandparents' rights. Not with Megan's history. We were sitting at the kitchen table, Lily secure in her high chair, happily mashing banana between her fingers and occasionally getting some into her mouth. My brother looked exhausted, but resolute. The confrontation with his former mother-in-law adding yet another layer of stress to his already overwhelming situation. I should have warned you she might show up, he admitted, watching his daughter's messy exploration of her food with a small smile. She's been leaving messages for me for weeks. I've been ignoring them, which probably just made her more determined, but that didn't stop her from trying or from continuing Megan's campaign of harassment. More letters, more calls to CPS. She even approached my oldest son at his bus stop one afternoon, trying to give him a backpack full of presents from his Aunt Megan. The incident at the bus stop was the most frightening escalation yet. My son had been waiting with several other children and the parent volunteer who supervised the stop. Megan's mother had approached, all grandmotherly smiles and gentle voice, calling my son by name and holding out a colorful backpack. Your Aunt Megan wanted you to have these special treats, she told him, trying to press the bag into his hands. She made them just for you. Thankfully, we had prepared our children for exactly this type of approach. My son had backed away, loudly, telling the parent volunteer that this woman wasn't supposed to talk to him. The volunteer had intervened immediately, placing herself between my son and Megan's mother, who had quickly retreated to her car and driven away when threatened with a call to the police. Thankfully, we prepared the kids for something like this. He refused to take anything and immediately told his teacher, who called us. When we checked the backpack, which he reported to the school office, we found it contained cookies. Peanut butter cookies. The school had secured the backpack in the office, not allowing anyone to open it until police arrived. When the officer carefully examined the contents, he found a dozen homemade peanut butter cookies wrapped in plastic along with a note in childish handwriting. Special treats for my favorite nephew. Love, Aunt Megan. The handwriting was clearly an adult's attempt to look like a child's. Large wobbly letters in colorful marker. The cookies themselves looked innocent enough, but a laboratory test later confirmed they contained not just peanut butter, but an unusually high concentration of peanut protein, as if ground peanuts had been added to the recipe to increase their potency. The deliberate targeting of my son's allergy, the calculated attempt to bypass adult supervision by approaching him directly, and the clear coordination between Megan and her mother revealed a level of malice that shocked even the investigating officers. The police issued a restraining order against Megan's mother, but that just drove her efforts underground. She created fake social media accounts to spread rumors about us. She contacted my employer with false accusations. She even showed up at my husband's workplace, causing such a scene that security had to escort her out. Her tactics became increasingly sophisticated and difficult to trace directly to her. Anonymous posts appeared in local Facebook groups questioning our fitness as caregivers. Emails from untraceable accounts reached my supervisors at work, alleging I was stealing company resources to care for Lily. My husband's colleagues received messages claiming he had a history of domestic violence. Each accusation was carefully crafted to be just plausible enough to require denial, just serious enough to plant seeds of doubt. The constant need to defend ourselves, to explain the situation to new people, to counter each fresh allegation was exhausting. It created a background hum of stress that never fully dissipated. A constant vigilance that wore away at our energy and peace of mind. Through it all, we tried to maintain some semblance of normalcy for the kids and for Lily. My brother was a constant presence, grateful for our help, but increasingly worried about the toll this was taking on all of us. We worked hard to create pockets of ordinary family life amid the chaos, movie nights with homemade popcorn, weekend trips to the park, birthday celebrations with balloons and cake. Lily continued to grow and develop, seemingly untouched by the drama swirling around her. She took her first steps holding onto the coffee table, spoke her first word, Dada, and developed a passion for a stuffed elephant that had to accompany her everywhere. My children adjusted to the new security measures as if they were normal, reminding each other to check the peephole before opening doors, to never share our address with strangers, to tell an adult immediately if anyone they didn't know approached them. They accepted these precautions without question, incorporating them into their understanding of how the world worked. Their resilience was both inspiring and heartbreaking. No child should have to learn such vigilance so young. Maybe I should move, he suggested one night after putting Lily to bed. Take her somewhere. Megan and her mother can't find us. We were sitting in the dimly lit living room, speaking in hushed tones to avoid waking Lily, who was asleep in the portable crib nearby. My brother looked worn down, the constant stress etching lines around his eyes that hadn't been there a year ago. He twisted his wedding ring absently as he spoke. He still wore it, though whether from habit or some lingering attachment to his marriage, I wasn't sure. The idea of them moving away had occurred to me as well, but I had been reluctant to suggest it, knowing how much my brother relied on our support system. The thought of losing them both made my heart ache, but I understood his desperation. The mere suggestion created a hollow feeling in my chest. Lily had become such an integral part of our family. Her toys scattered across our living room, her high chair, a permanent fixture in our kitchen, her giggles, a daily soundtrack in our home. My children adored their cousin, incorporating her into their games and routines with the easy acceptance of youth. The thought of her growing up far away, of seeing her only on occasional visits, of missing her milestones and everyday moments was painful to contemplate. But against that pain had to be weighed her safety and my brother's peace of mind. Would that really solve anything? They'd just focus all their attention on us instead. It was a practical concern, but also a selfish one. Part of me wanted them to stay, not just because we loved having Lily in our daily lives, but because I feared what Megan and her mother might do if their primary target moved beyond reach. Would their obsession transfer entirely to my family, particularly my son, who had already been singled out for their most dangerous attacks? Would the harassment escalate further without Lily nearby to serve as their ostensible motivation? There were no easy answers, no clear path that guaranteed safety for everyone involved. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. I don't know what else to do. The doctors say Megan isn't improving. If anything, she's getting worse, more fixated on revenge fantasies. The weight of his words hung in the air between us. Megan's doctors had been providing regular updates on her condition, partly due to the ongoing legal proceedings and partly as a safety measure given her documented threats. The reports had grown increasingly concerning. Her refusal to engage meaningfully with therapy, her tendency to manipulate less experienced staff members, her elaborate explanations for her behavior that cast herself as the victim, and everyone else as persecutors. The latest evaluation had used terms like treatment-resistant and poor prognosis for rehabilitation, clinical language that translated to a devastating reality. Megan might never get better enough to be safe around her own child. I put my arm around his shoulders. We'll figure it out together. It was a simple promise, but when I meant with every fiber of my being, whatever came next, whatever decisions needed to be made, we would face them as a family. My brother leaned into the embrace slightly, some of the tension leaving his body at this small reassurance. Lily stirred in her sleep, making the soft, snuffling sounds that usually preceded either settling deeper or waking fully. We both turned to look at her, this tiny person who had become the center of so much love and so much conflict. In sleep, her face was peaceful, untroubled by the complex adult world that swirled around her. For her sake, if nothing else, we had to find a way forward. 2 days later, I got a call from Lily's daycare. She'd been there for a few hours while my brother was at work and I was at a doctor's appointment. The daycare was a small home-based operation run by a woman named Maria, who had been caring for children in the neighborhood for over 20 years. We had chosen it carefully, attracted by the small number of children, the secure fenced yard, and Maria's warm but no-nonsense approach to child care. She had been fully briefed on the situation with Megan and had strict protocols in place about who could pick up Lily. The caller ID showing the daycare's number in the middle of the day sent an immediate surge of adrenaline through my system. Someone tried to pick up Lily, the director said, her voice shaking. She had ID saying she was you, but Melissa recognized her from the photo you provided of Megan's mother. Maria's voice was usually calm and steady, her years of experience giving her an unflappable demeanor in most child air crisis. The tremor in her words now indicated just how serious the situation was. Melissa was Maria's assistant, a college student studying early childhood education, who helped during the busier hours of the day. The fact that she had recognized Megan's mother from the security photos we had distributed to anyone who cared for Lily was a testament to how seriously they had taken our warnings. My blood ran cold. Is Lily okay? The question came out in a rush, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I was already grabbing my keys, heading for the door. Phone pressed to my ear as I moved. The doctor's office where I'd been waiting faded to background noise. The receptionist's concerned look barely registering as I hurried past. Nothing mattered except getting to Lily, confirming with my own eyes that she was safe. She's fine. We called the police, but the woman left before they arrived. Maria's voice steadied somewhat as she assured me of Lily's safety. Melissa noticed something off about the ID right away. It looked real, but the birth date didn't match what we have in our records for you. When she asked for additional identification, the woman got flustered and tried to insist we were wasting time, that you were in a hurry. That's when Melissa recognized her, and I called the police. In the background, I could hear the normal sounds of the daycare: children playing, a cartoon theme song, the clatter of toys, ordinary sounds that now seemed precious in their normally, a reminder of the innocent world we were fighting to preserve for Lily. I rushed to the daycare, called my brother, and brought Lily home, my hands shaking so badly I could barely buckle her car seat. This had gone beyond harassment. They were trying to kidnap Lily. Now, the drive from the daycare to our house was the longest 15 minutes of my life, though in reality, I probably broke several speed limits getting there. Lily sat in her car seat, babbling happily and playing with a small stuffed rabbit, completely unaware of how close she had come to being taken. I kept glancing at her in the rearview mirror, reassuring myself that she was really there, really safe. My brother met us at the house, having left work the moment I called. His face was ashen as I recounted what had happened, his hands shaking as he lifted Lily from her car seat and held her close, burying his face in her curls as if to convince himself she was truly unharmed. The police took it seriously this time. They increased patrols in our neighborhood and issued another restraining order against Megan's mother. But we knew paper wouldn't stop her. The officers who responded were thorough and concerned, taking detailed statements and photographs of the fake ID that Maria had managed to partially document with her phone. They promised increased drive-bys of both our home and the daycare, and connected us with a detective specializing in family crimes who would oversee the case. But as one officer candidly admitted while his partner was taking notes outside, restraining orders are just pieces of paper. They're only as effective as the person's willingness to obey them. The grim reality of his words settled over us like a physical weight. Legal protections could only do so much against someone determined to cause harm. That night, as we were discussing our options, my phone rang. It was Dr. Patel. We were gathered in the living room, my husband, my brother, and I speaking in hushed tones while the children slept upstairs and Lily dozed in her portable crib. We had been weighing various security options, from hiring private protection to installing more sophisticated alarm systems. The sound of my phone ringing made us all jump, the tension of the day having left us on edge. Dr. Patel's name on the caller ID was unexpected. She rarely called directly, usually communicating through official channels about Megan's treatment. "I thought you should know," she said without preamble. "Megan has been refusing her medication for weeks. We've just discovered she's been hiding the pills. That's likely why her condition has been deteriorating." Her voice was grave, the professional distance she usually maintained giving way to genuine concern. In the background, I could hear the muffled sounds of the psychiatric facility, a PA system paging someone, the distant sound of a door closing. Dr. Patel was calling outside of normal channels. I realized this wasn't an official update, but a personal warning from someone who understood the real danger Megan posed. "Can't you make her take them?" I asked. The question came out more plaintively than I intended, betraying my exhaustion and fear. I was sitting on the couch, one hand clutching the phone, the other pressed against my forehead, where a stress headache was beginning to form. My husband and brother watched me intently, trying to piece together the conversation from my side alone. The implications of what Dr. Patel was saying were clear. Megan had been deliberately sabotaging her own treatment, maintaining her delusions and obsessions through calculated deception. "We're switching to injectable medications that can't be refused," she explained. "But I'm concerned about some of the statements she's been making in therapy. She's convinced you've brainwashed her daughter against her." Dr. Patel's voice remained measured, but I could detect the underlying worry in her tone. The switch to injectable medications was a significant escalation in Megan's treatment plan, indicating that her doctors recognized the seriousness of her condition and her resistance to conventional approaches. It was both reassuring that they were taking stronger measures and alarming that such measures were necessary. The content of Megan's delusions was evolving, it seemed, incorporating new elements as Lily grew and developed away from her influence. "Lily is 9 months old," I said incredulously. "She can barely say dada, let alone understand brainwashing." I couldn't keep the note of disbelief from my voice. The absurdity of the accusation would have been almost comical in another context. The idea that a baby who was just mastering the concept of object permanence could be brainwashed against anyone. But coming from Megan, filtered through her distorted perception of reality, the claim took on a more sinister quality. It represented yet another justification for her fixation on regaining control of Lily. Another piece of her narrative casting me as the villain who needed to be overcome. I know. That's why I'm concerned. Megan's grip on reality is slipping, and she's been making some disturbing statements about your son as well. The shift in focus from Lily to my son sent a fresh wave of alarm through me. I straightened on the couch, suddenly alert, my free hand gripping the cushion beside me. My husband noticed the change in my posture and moved closer, placing his hand on my shoulder in silent support. My brother's expression darkened, his jaw tightening as he anticipated bad news. The mention of my son in this context could only mean one thing. Megan's obsession with his allergy had not faded with time and distance. A chill ran down my spine. What kind of statements? The question came out barely above a whisper, though I already knew the answer in my heart. Megan's fixation on my son's peanut allergy had been consistent from the beginning. The deliberate exposure to allergens, the taunting gifts, the cookies sent to his bus stop. It was a vulnerability she had identified and targeted repeatedly, a way to hurt me by threatening what I loved most. The fact that she was still focused on this particular avenue of attack, even while confined in a secure facility, spoke to the depth of her obsession. Dr. Patel hesitated. She seems fixated on the idea that if your son were no longer in the picture, everything would go back to normal. I've reported this as a potential threat, but I wanted to warn you directly as well. The clinical language couldn't disguise the gravity of what she was saying. Megan wasn't just fantasizing about regaining custody of Lily anymore. She was actively contemplating harm to my child as a means to that end. The euphemism, no longer in the picture, hung in the air, its implications chilling. This wasn't just harassment or intimidation. It was a potential death threat against a child. My child. I felt the blood drain from my face, my hand going numb around the phone as Dr. Patel's words sank in. After that call, we went into full lockdown mode again. The kids stayed home from school. We hired a security company to install cameras and motion sensors. My brother took emergency leave from work to stay with us. Our home transformed once more into a fortress, but with even more stringent measures than before. The security company worked through the night, installing state-of-the-art equipment that would alert us to any approach to the house. We established a safe room in the basement, stocked with emergency supplies and a dedicated phone line. We created code words and signals the children could use if they felt unsafe. We changed our routines completely, shopping at different stores, taking different routes when we had to leave the house, varying our schedules to be unpredictable. The children accepted these changes with the resilience of youth, turning some of the security measures into games to make them less frightening. But I could see the strain in their eyes, the weariness that no child should have to carry. 3 tense days passed, then 4, a week, nothing happened. The police checked in regularly, but there was no sign of Megan's mother. Even the anonymous letters stopped. The silence was almost more unnerving than the active harassment had been. Each day that passed without incident stretched our nerves tighter. The anticipation of what might come, creating a constant low-grade anxiety that permeated everything. We jumped at unexpected sounds, scrutinized every unfamiliar car that drove down our street, questioned every delivery person who approached our door. The children became more subdued, picking up on the adults' tension despite our efforts to shield them from it. Lily, sensitive to the atmosphere around her, became clingy and fussy, wanting to be held constantly, as if she, too, sensed that something was wrong. Maybe she gave up, my husband suggested hopefully. We were standing in the kitchen, watching through the window as the children played in the backyard under my brother's watchful eye. It was a beautiful spring day, the kind that normally would have found us at the park or on a family hike. Instead, we were confined to our property, the high fence around the yard providing a modicum of security that allowed the children this small freedom. My husband's words held a note of desperate optimism, a need to believe that the worst might be behind us. I shook my head. People like that don't give up. They're planning something. Even as I said it, I felt the truth of it settle in my bones. The cessation of harassment wasn't a sign of surrender. It was a tactical retreat. Megan and her mother were regrouping, adjusting their strategy in response to the increased security and police attention. The quiet wasn't peace. It was the stillness before a storm, the held breath before a predator pounces. Whatever they were planning next would be calculated to bypass our defenses to strike where and when we least expected it. I was right, but what came next was worse than anything I could have imagined. The day began normally enough, as normal as life could be under our self-imposed lockdown. The children had settled into homeschooling routines. My husband was working remotely, and my brother was helping with Lily while I caught up on household tasks. The morning passed uneventfully, giving way to a warm afternoon that tempted us outside despite our caution. The backyard was secure, visible from multiple windows of the house, and the children were desperate for fresh air and sunshine after days of confinement. It was a Sunday afternoon. My brother had taken Lily to the park across the street, visible from our front window. My husband was in the backyard with our youngest, and I was helping my oldest son with a science project at the kitchen table. The decision to let my brother take Lily to the small neighborhood park hadn't been made lately. We had discussed it thoroughly, weighing the risks against the benefits of some normally and fresh air. The park was directly across from our house, visible from our front windows, and at that time of day, usually empty except for a few neighborhood children. My brother had promised to stay alert, to keep Lily in the stroller, except for a brief swing ride, and to return immediately at the first sign of anything unusual. I stood at the window watching them cross the street, my son beside me at the kitchen table spreading out his materials for a model of the solar system we were building together. The doorbell rang. I checked the security camera on my phone and saw a delivery person holding a large basket wrapped in cellophane. The delivery person wore the standard uniform of a local courier service we had used before, a navy polo shirt with a company logo, khaki pants, a baseball cap pulled low over their face. They held a clipboard in one hand and the elaborate gift basket in the other, standing at a respectful distance from the door as they waited for an answer. Nothing about the scene triggered immediate alarm. Deliveries were common in our neighborhood, and we had received several care packages from concerned friends and family who knew about our situation. "Stay here," I told my son, going to the door. He nodded, already absorbed in painting a small styrofoam ball to represent Mercury, his tongue poking out slightly in concentration as he tried to get the color just right. The kitchen table was covered with newspaper to protect it from paint spills. The materials for his project spread out in careful organization. I hesitated at the doorway, looking back at him, his head bent over his work, completely engrossed in his task. The sunlight from the window highlighting the cowlick in his hair that never would lie flat no matter how I combed it. The ordinary domesticity of the scene provided a moment of normalcy in our disrupted lives. The delivery guy looked bored. "Delivery for the family," he said, holding out the basket already paid for. He barely made eye contact, seeming more interested in completing his delivery and moving on to the next stop than in who was receiving the package. The clipboard he thrust toward me contained a standard delivery confirmation form. Nothing that raised immediate suspicion. The basket itself was large and elaborate, wrapped in blue cellophane that obscured the specific contents but suggested a generous gift. A card was attached to the front with a ribbon, the envelope sealed and addressed simply to the family. I hesitated, but took it. It was heavy and wrapped in blue cellophane with a card that read, "Congratulations on your new family." The weight of the basket surprised me. It was substantial, suggesting it contained more than just the typical fruit and snacks found in gift arrangements. The blue cellophane crinkled under my fingers as I examined it, trying to discern the contents through the wrapping. The card's message struck me as odd. We weren't a new family in any sense, and there was nothing recent to congratulate us for, but gift basket messages were often generic, I reasoned, perhaps selected from limited options by whoever had sent it. Still, something about it felt off, triggering the heightened sense of caution I developed over the past months. Something felt off. I set the basket on the entry table and carefully peeled back the cellophane. Inside were gourmet food items, a bottle of sparkling cider, and several smaller wrapped packages. The arrangement was elaborate and expensive looking. Artisanal crackers, gourmet cheeses, specialty jams, chocolate-covered fruits, and various other delicacies nestled in decorative shredded paper. The sparkling cider was a high-end brand, its bottle elegant and festive. Scattered throughout were small boxes wrapped in silver paper with decorative ribbon, each about the size of a deck of cards. The overall presentation was beautiful and thoughtful, exactly the kind of gift a well-meaning friend might send to cheer up a family going through difficult times. But something still nagged at me, a persistent sense of wrongness that I couldn't quite identify. I opened the card first. "Enjoy your last meal together. Love, M." The message was printed in a flowing script that mimicked handwriting. The threat unmistakable despite the elegant presentation. The initial M could only stand for Megan or her mother, confirming my worst fears about the source of the gift. The words "last meal" sent a jolt of pure terror through me, their implication clear and horrifying. This wasn't a gift, it was a threat, a declaration of intent disguised as a gesture of goodwill. And if the basket itself was the threat, then its contents. My heart stopped. I yelled for my husband, then turned to tell my son to get away from the basket, but he was already standing beside me, curious about the delivery. I hadn't heard him approach, too focused on the disturbing card and its implications. He stood next to me now, his small face curious as he peered at the elaborate basket. Paint smudged on his fingers from his project. The innocent interest in his expression contrasted sharply with the malevolence contained in the gift. The justician, making my blood run cold. I needed to get him away from the basket immediately to remove him from proximity to whatever danger it contained. "What's in the little packages?" he asked, reaching for one. His voice was bright with curiosity, his hand already extending toward one of the silver-wrapped boxes before I could process what was happening. Children are naturally drawn to presents, to the mystery and excitement of unwrapping something unknown. Under normal circumstances, his interest would have been completely understandable, but these circumstances were far from normal, and the realization of what might be in those packages hit me with the force of a physical blow. "Don't touch anything," I shouted, grabbing his hand. Too late. He'd already picked up a small box wrapped in silver paper. As he turned it over in his hands, I noticed a fine powder leaking from one corner. My shout startled him, his eyes widening in surprise at my uncharacteristic volume and urgency. But the warning came a fraction of a second too late. He had already lifted one of the small packages, his fingers curling around it with innocent curiosity. As he rotated it in his hands, examining it from different angles, I saw it. A fine, tan-colored powder sifting from a small tear in the wrapping paper, dusting his fingers and falling onto his wrist. Time seemed to slow as I recognized what I was seeing. As the horrifying reality of Megan's plan became clear. Put it down, I grabbed the box, but some of the powder had already spilled onto his hands. He looked up at me confused as angry red hives began appearing on his skin. I snatched the package from him, my movements frantic but careful not to disperse more of the powder into the air. The box joined the basket on the entry table as I focused entirely on my son, watching in horror as his body began to react to the allergen. The hives appeared with frightening speed, raised red welts spreading across his hands and wrists where the powder had made contact. His expression shifted from confusion to alarm as he felt the familiar sensation of an allergic reaction beginning, his eyes meeting mine with growing fear. "Mom," he said, his voice already changing, becoming wheezy. "I don't feel good." The change in his voice was the first sign of his airway beginning to constrict, the allergic reaction progressing from skin contact to a systemic response. His breathing became audibly labored, each inhalation requiring more effort than the last. I recognized the signs from his previous severe reaction years ago: the rapid progression, the respiratory involvement, the look of growing panic in his eyes as he struggled to draw breath. This was anaphylaxis, the life-threatening allergic response we had feared and prepared for since his diagnosis. I screamed for my husband, grabbed my son's EpiPen from the kitchen drawer, and jabbed it into his thigh as he began gasping for air. My husband ran in, took one look at the situation, and called 911. My scream echoed through the house, raw with terror and urgency. I ran to the kitchen, yanking open the drawer where we kept his emergency medication, my hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped the EpiPen as I removed it from its case. My son had followed me, his steps already unsteady, his breathing becoming more labored with each passing second. I guided him to sit on the kitchen floor, quickly removed the safety cap from the auto-injector, and pressed it firmly against his outer thigh, holding it in place for the full 10-second count as the epinephrine was delivered into his muscle. He winced at the injection, but didn't cry out, a worrying sign that he was focusing all his energy on breathing. My husband appeared in the doorway, alerted by my scream, his expression shifting from confusion to horror as he assessed the situation. Without needing explanation, he pulled out his phone and dialed emergency services, his voice steady despite the fear evident in his eyes as he reported a severe allergic reaction and our address. He knelt beside our son, taking his hand, his presence providing comfort while I monitored the effectiveness of the epinephrine. "Peanut powder," I told him, already reaching for the second EpiPen we kept as backup. "It was in the gift basket." The words came out between ragged breaths, my own body responding to the adrenaline surge of the emergency. My husband's face darkened with understanding and rage as the pieces fell into place. The mysterious delivery, the powder, our son's reaction. He squeezed our son's hand reassuringly while maintaining his composed tone with the 911 operator, providing our son's medical history and details about the allergen exposure. In the background, I could hear our youngest child calling from the backyard, confused about why his father had suddenly run inside. The second EpiPen was in my hand, ready if the first injection didn't reverse the symptoms quickly enough. The ambulance arrived in minutes, but they felt like hours. My son's face was swollen, his breathing labored despite the epinephrine. The paramedics rushed him into the ambulance, letting me ride along while my husband stayed with our youngest and called my brother to warn him. The wail of sirens announced their arrival, the flashing lights casting eerie patterns through our front windows. The paramedics moved with practice efficiency, assessing my son's condition, administering oxygen, checking his vital signs, and preparing him for transport. His face had swollen significantly, his features distorted by the allergic response, his lips taking on a bluish tinge that terrified me. The epinephrine had slowed the progression of symptoms, but hadn't reversed them completely, a sign of how severe this reaction was. They lifted him onto a stretcher, his small body looking impossibly fragile against the stark white sheets and medical equipment. In the ambulance, I held his hand while the paramedics worked around us, the vehicle siren clearing a path through traffic as we raced toward the hospital. My son's eyes found mine, wide with fear but trusting that I would make everything okay. I forced a reassuring smile, squeezing his hand gently, promising him that he would be fine, even as my own heart raced with fear. The paramedic monitoring his oxygen levels gave me occasional updates. His saturation was low but stable, his heart rate elevated but strong. Small comforts in a situation that felt anything but comforting. At the hospital, they took my son straight to the emergency room. I paced the waiting area, calling the police to report what had happened. They sent officers to our house to secure the gift basket as evidence and took my statement at the hospital. The emergency department was a blur of activity, doctors and nurses moving quickly, medical terminology being exchanged over my son's bed, I-4 lines being established, medications being administered. I was gently but firmly directed to the waiting area, assured that they needed space to work and would update me as soon as possible. The waiting room was surprisingly quiet for a Sunday afternoon, just a few other families sitting in uncomfortable chairs beneath fluorescent lights. I paced the length of the room repeatedly, unable to sit still, my phone pressed to my ear as I reported the incident to the police. The officer who took my statement was professional but compassionate, asking detailed questions about the delivery, the basket's contents, and any suspicious activity we had noticed beforehand. I described everything I could remember. The delivery person's appearance, the basket's presentation, the card with its threatening message. I explained about Megan and her mother, about the restraining orders and previous incidents, about Dr. Patel's warning regarding Megan's fixation on my son. The officer assured me they would treat this as an attempted murder investigation, not a simple case of allergen exposure. The deliberate nature of the act, the clear intent to cause harm, elevated this from an unfortunate accident to a criminal assault. Hours later, a doctor finally came out to update me. He stabilized, she said, and I nearly collapsed with relief. It was a severe reaction, but you acted quickly. The epinephrine bought him crucial time. The doctor was a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and a direct manner. She explained that my son had experienced a severe anaphylactic reaction, but the prompt administration of epinephrine had prevented the worst outcomes. They had given him additional medications to counteract the allergic response, antihistamines, steroids, more epinephrine, and would need to keep him overnight for observation to ensure the reaction didn't return as the medications wore off. But his vital signs were good, his breathing was improving, and barring complications, he should make a full recovery. The words washed over me like a physical relief. My legs suddenly weak as the adrenaline that had been sustaining me began to ebb. When they finally let me see him, I broke down in tears. He looked so small in the hospital bed, his face still puffy, an oxygen monitor clipped to his finger. The pediatric room was painted in cheerful colors, cartoon characters decorating the walls in an attempt to make the medical equipment less frightening. But nothing could disguise the seriousness of what had happened. The IV line in his arm delivering fluids and medication, the monitor tracking his heart rate and oxygen levels, the lingering swelling that distorted his familiar features. His eyes were closed when I entered, but they fluttered open at the sound of my approach. Despite everything, he managed a small smile when he saw me, his resilience breaking through my carefully maintained composure. The tears came then, hot and unstoppable. Relief and lingering fear and love all mingled together as I took his hand in mine. "Hey, buddy," I said, taking his hand. He gave me a weak smile. I wiped away my tears quickly, not wanting to frighten him with the depth of my emotion. His hand felt small and warm in mine, his fingers curling around my own in a gesture of trust that made my heart ache. The swelling in his face had begun to subside, revealing more of his familiar features, though his eyes remained puffy and his lips slightly enlarged. He looked exhausted, the ordeal having drained his energy completely, but the dangerous blue tinge was gone from his skin, replaced by his normal color. Did I get peanuts again? His voice was hoarse arse, but stronger than it had been in the ambulance, the wheezing quality diminished by the medications and oxygen. The question was asked, matter-of-factly, without accusation or self-pity, just a child trying to understand what had happened to his body. The simplicity of it, the innocent acceptance that sometimes his body betrayed him in this particular way, made my throat tighten with fresh emotion. He had lived with this allergy for most of his life, had adapted to its limitations and dangers with a grace that sometimes made me forget how heavy a burden it was for a child to carry. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Words seemed inadequate in that moment. How could I explain to my child that someone had deliberately tried to harm him, had calculated and planned and executed an attack designed to exploit his vulnerability? How could I maintain his sense of safety in a world where such malice existed? So I simply nodded, squeezing his hand, gently, letting him know I was there, that he was safe now, that I wouldn't leave his side. The unspoken communication between us, the reassurance in my touch, the trust in his eyes, said more than words could convey. Was it Aunt Megan? He asked, surprising me with his perception. Children perceive more than we give them credit for, picking up on tensions and connections that adults sometimes try to shield them from. My son had clearly understood more about the situation with Megan than I had realized, had drawn his own conclusions about the source of danger in our lives. His question wasn't fearful, but curious, seeking confirmation of a pattern he had already recognized. It was a reminder that despite our efforts to protect him, he was developing his own understanding of the complex adult world around him. We think so, I admitted, but you're safe now. I chose honesty, delivered as gently as possible. He deserved the truth, even if it was difficult, even if it confirmed that someone who should have cared for him had instead tried to hurt him. But I balanced that truth with reassurance. The danger had passed. He was surrounded by people who would protect him. His safety was our highest priority. He nodded solemnly, processing this information with the remarkable adaptability of childhood. Then he asked if his brothers and sister were okay, if Lily was safe, his concern immediately turning to others despite his own ordeal. His compassion in that moment, his instinct to worry about his family, even from a hospital bed, filled me with a fierce pride that momentarily overshadowed my fear and anger. The police confirmed what we already knew. The delivery had been arranged by Megan's mother using a fake name. The basket contained multiple items laced with peanut products, including the powder that had spilled on my son's hands. The investigation moved quickly. The evidence overwhelming. The delivery service had records of the order placed online using a prepaid credit card, but traced to an IP address associated with Megan's mother's home computer. The basket itself had been assembled at a local gift shop where the owner remembered the particular customer who had insisted on including the small wrapped packages she had brought herself, claiming they were special chocolates for her grandchildren. Laboratory analysis confirmed that the powder contained concentrated peanut protein, essentially pure allergen in a form designed to disperse easily and be absorbed through skin contact. The other wrapped packages contained similar hazards: cookies with ground peanuts, candies with peanut butter centers, even what appeared to be a harmless stuffed toy that had been dusted with peanut powder. The deliberate, calculated nature of the attack was undeniable. They issued an arrest warrant for her immediately. They found her 2 days later trying to cross the state line. In her car were detailed notes about our family's schedule, more peanut products, and most disturbingly, a crude plan to start a fire at our house that mentioned eliminating the allergic problem once and for all. The arrest itself was anticlimactic, a routine traffic stop for a broken taillight that revealed her identity when the officer ran her license. She had been driving north, apparently heading for a neighboring state where she had a sister living in a remote area. The contents of her car revealed the full extent of her plans, not just the attempt that had already occurred, but future attacks she had been preparing to carry out. The notebook found in her glove compartment contains surveillance notes about our comingings and goings, detailed observations about which windows we left open, which doors we used most frequently, even which bedroom belonged to which child. The fire plan was the most chilling discovery. A crude diagram of our house, with arrows indicating entry points and accelerant placement, with specific notation about ensuring my oldest son's room was targeted first. The phrase eliminating the allergic problem was underlined multiple times. The words pressed so deeply into the paper that they were visible from the reverse side. She was arrested and charged with attempted murder, along with a host of other charges. During questioning, she admitted that she'd been helping Megan all along, smuggling in phones during visits, sending the letters, stalking our family, all because she believed we had stolen Lily and turned everyone against her daughter. The interrogation video was shown to us by the detective handling the case. A courtesy extended because of the seriousness of the crimes and our right to understand the threat we had faced. Megan's mother sat at a metal table in an interview room, her previously immaculate appearance disheveled from her time in holding, but her demeanor still imperious, still convinced of her righteousness. She spoke freely, almost proudly, of how she had assisted her daughter, describing the elaborate system they had developed for communication, the code words they used in their seemingly innocent conversations during visits, the plans they had formulated together. Her confession wasn't motivated by remorse, but by a desire to justify her actions, to explain the twisted logic that had led her to target a child with a deadly allergy. "They took everything from my daughter," she said repeatedly, her voice cold and certain. "They turned her husband against her. They stole her baby. They locked her away. They deserved what was coming to them." With Megan's mother in jail and Megan herself under stricter supervision at the psychiatric facility, we finally had a moment to breathe. My son recovered fully from the allergic reaction, though the psychological scars ran deeper. He was afraid to open packages, suspicious of food he hadn't seen prepared. The physical symptoms resolved within days. The swelling subsided, the hives disappeared, his breathing returned to normal. But the emotional impact lingered in ways that broke my heart to witness. He would freeze at the sound of the doorbell, his body tensing as if preparing for danger. He began checking and rechecking food labels, even for products he had eaten safely many times before. At restaurants, he would watch anxiously as servers approached with our meals, visibly relaxing only after I had verified his food was safe. He developed a new bedtime ritual of checking under his bed and in his closet. Not for monsters, but for anything dangerous that might have been hidden there. These new anxieties were the invisible wounds of trauma, harder to treat than the physical reaction had been. My brother was devastated by how close we'd come to tragedy. "This is all my fault," he said one night after the kids were in bed. "I brought her into your lives. We were sitting on the back porch. The spring evening mild and fragrant with blooming flowers. Lily had been put to bed hours earlier. The older children finally settled after their bedtime routines. My brother sat hunched in an Adirondack chair, his posture reflecting the weight of guilt he carried. The outdoor lights cast long shadows across the yard, the peaceful scene at odds with the heaviness of our conversation. He looked older than his years, the events of the past months having etched permanent lines around his eyes and mouth. "You couldn't have known," I told him, though part of me had wondered how he'd missed the red flags early in their relationship. It was true that he couldn't have predicted the extent of Megan's disturbance, the depth of her capacity for harm. But there had been signs, small inconsistencies in her stories, moments of disproportionate anger, manipulative tactics that had been dismissed as personality quirks or stress responses. I had noticed some of them during their visits, had felt occasional unease that I had pushed aside out of respect for my brother's choices. Now, with the benefit of hindsight, those moments seemed like glaring warnings we had all chosen to ignore. But voicing that thought wouldn't help my brother now. He was already drowning in self-incrimination, already punishing himself more harshly than anyone else could. "I should have listened to you sooner," he insisted. "About the peanut butter, about everything." I was so blind, his voice broke on the last word, his hands clenching into fists on his knees. The memory of that first confrontation over the peanut products in our kitchen seemed distant now, belonging to a different lifetime when the threat had still been abstract, still deniable. How differently things might have unfolded if he had recognized the deliberate nature of Megan's actions then, if he had been able to see past his love for her to the danger she represented. But love is a powerful blinder, and Megan had been skilled at presenting her behavior as misunderstood rather than malicious. The truth was, we all had been blind in different ways. I'd given Megan second chances she didn't deserve. I'd ignored my instincts when they screamed that something was wrong. I'd prioritized family peace over my children's safety. Never again. My own guilt was a constant companion now. The knowledge that I had allowed Megan back into our lives after the first incident, that I had accepted her apology and believed in her redemption despite the warning signs. I had wanted to believe people could change, that mental illness could explain and excuse behavior that was actually calculated and deliberate. I had prioritized the ideal of family unity over the very real danger signals my instincts had detected. These were mistakes I would carry with me always, lessons purchased at nearly unthinkable cost. But they were lessons I had learned completely. My tolerance for risk, where my children were concerned, had been reduced to zero. My willingness to extend second chances to those who had demonstrated ill intent completely extinguished. In the aftermath, we made some hard decisions. My brother decided to move several states away, where he had a job offer, and where Lily could grow up without the shadow of her mother's actions hanging over her. It broke my heart to see them go, but I understood it was for the best. The decision wasn't made lightly or quickly. We spent weeks discussing options, weighing pros and cons, considering alternatives, but in the end, the need for a fresh start for both my brother and Lily outweighed the benefits of staying nearby. He had received a job offer from a college friend whose company had offices across the country. An opportunity that would allow him to transfer to a location where Megan had no connections, no support system, no way of easily reaching them, even if she were eventually released. It was a chance to build a life for Lily that wasn't defined by her mother's actions, where she wouldn't grow up known as that poor child whose mother tried to alive her cousin. The distance would be painful for all of us. The separation from a niece and cousin we had come to love deeply, a genuine loss, but it was a sacrifice made for Lily's future, for her chance at normally. "We'll visit," he promised. "And when Lily's older, I'll make sure she knows the truth about all of it." We stood in the driveway on their last morning, the car packed with essentials for the long drive ahead. Lily sat in her car seat, happily babbling and playing with a stuffed elephant, oblivious to the significance of the moment. My children clustered around the car, taking turns saying goodbye to their cousin, making her laugh with silly faces and promises of video calls. My brother and I stood slightly apart, the weight of the moment heavy between us. His promise was both reassurance and acknowledgement. That distance wouldn't sever our connection. That Lily would know her extended family despite the separation. That the truth would not be hidden from her when she was old enough to understand it. Not the sanitized version that would protect Megan's image, but the real story of what had happened and why they had needed to leave. The night before they left, as I rocked Lily one last time, I whispered promises in her ear that she was loved, that none of this was her fault, that she would always have a place in our family, no matter what. The nursery was dimly lit, just a small nightlight casting a gentle glow across the room. Lily was heavy and warm in my arms, her eyes fighting sleep despite the late hour, as if she sensed the significance of this last bedtime routine. I held her close, breathing in the sweet baby scent of her hair, memorizing the weight of her in my arms, the way her small hand curled around my finger as I rocked her. The words I whispered were for her, though she was too young to understand them. Promises I would keep for the rest of my life. Truths I would make sure she knew when she was old enough to ask questions about her mother, about why they had moved away, about the family that loved her from a distance. In that moment, I made my own private vow that no matter what the future held, Lily would never doubt her place in our hearts, never question her worthiness of love, never believe that her mother's actions defined her own identity. As for Megan, she was transferred to a maximum security psychiatric facility after her mother's arrest revealed her role in the ongoing harassment and the attempt on my son's life. The doctors were less optimistic about her recovery now, seeing her actions as calculated rather than solely the result of mental illness. The updated assessment from her treatment team was sobering. What had initially been diagnosed as postpartum psychosis, complicated by underlying mental health issues, was now recognized as something more complex and concerning. The calculated nature of her actions, the sustained focus on revenge over many months, the ability to manipulate others into assisting her plans. These suggested a level of functioning that contradicted the image of someone completely in the grip of delusions. Her psychiatric issues were real, but they existed alongside personality traits that were fundamentally problematic. An inability to empathize with others, a tendency to view relationships as transactional, a profound sense of entitlement, and a capacity for sustained malice that transcended her diagnosis. Some people just have darkness in them, Dr. Patel told me during our final conversation. The illness may have exacerbated it, but it didn't create it. We met for coffee near my workplace, a neutral location away from both the psychiatric facility and my home. Dr. Patel had requested the meeting as a professional courtesy, a final update before Megan was transferred to the new facility and her case assigned to a different treatment team. The cafe was busy with the morning rush, the background noise of espresso machines and casual conversations creating a buffer of privacy around our table. Dr. Patel looked tired, but composed. Her professional demeanor softened somewhat by the setting and the circumstances. Her words weren't clinical, but human. An acknowledgement that some aspects of human behavior exist beyond the explanatory power of diagnostic categories. That sometimes the darkness in a person's actions reflect something fundamental about their character rather than an illness that can be treated and cured. I thought about Megan's journal, about the calculated cruelty I'd seen even before her breakdown, about how she targeted my son's allergy from the very beginning, not out of ignorance, but malice. The journal entries flashed through my mind, the cold, deliberate planning, the satisfaction in describing potential harm, the absence of empathy or remorse. Those words hadn't been written in the grip of psychosis. They had been composed with clear intent, with awareness of consequences, with purposeful malice. The peanut butter incidents hadn't been impulsive acts born of pregnancy cravings or misunderstanding. They had been calculated attempts to cause harm, to exploit a known vulnerability, to assert power through fear. Understanding this distinction didn't lessen the tragedy of the situation, but it did clarify the nature of the threat we had faced. Not just a woman struggling with mental illness, but someone whose illness had provided cover and justification for a capacity for cruelty that had likely always existed within her. Sometimes I still wake up in the middle of the night, heart pounding, certain I've heard Megan's voice or footsteps in the hallway. The security system we installed remains active. We still check food packages carefully. My son still carries 2 EpiPens everywhere he goes. The trauma lingers in these small ways, in the startle response that sends my heart racing at unexpected sounds, in the habitual security checks that punctuate our daily routines, in the hypervigilance that has become second nature. I find myself awake at 3 a.m., moving silently through the house to check locks and peer out windows, reassuring myself that the perimeter is secure, that my children are safe in their beds. My son's backpack is never without his emergency medication. The twin auto-injector is a constant companion whether he's at school, at a friend's house, or just playing in the backyard. These precautions are practical, necessary, but they are also reminders of a vulnerability we can never completely eliminate. A danger we have learned exists in the world in a way we once couldn't have imagined. But slowly, day by day, we're reclaiming our lives. The nightmares come less frequently. My son is less jumpy around new foods. We're healing. Healing isn't linear. It comes in waves, in small victories, and occasional setbacks. There are good days when life feels almost normal, when we can go to a restaurant without scanning for exits or questioning the server in detail about food preparation. There are harder days when a package delivered to the wrong address triggers hours of anxiety. When my son refuses to eat something he's eaten safely before because it looks different. When a car driving slowly past our house sends me into a spiral of worry. But the good days gradually outnumber the bad. My son joins his friends for birthday parties again, armed with his own safe snacks and the knowledge that we're just a phone call away. We take family vacations, venturing further from home each time, expanding our comfort zone inch by inch. We laugh more easily, jump less frequently, sleep more soundly. These are the markers of recovery, the signposts that tell us we're moving forward, even when the path seems uncertain. And Lily, she's thriving in her new home, growing into a happy, healthy toddler who video chats with her cousins every weekend. My brother sends photos constantly. Lily's first steps, her first words, her first day of preschool. Sometimes I see shadows of Megan in her features, but never in her spirit. The weekly video calls have become a cherished ritual. The children gathering around the computer screen to share their news and hear Lily's latest adventures. Technology bridges the physical distance, allowing us to remain present in each other's lives despite the miles between us. Lily is walking now, running even, her personality emerging more distinctly with each passing month. She's stubborn and funny, creative and kind. A unique individual, forging her own identity separate from the circumstances of her birth. Sometimes, when she smiles a certain way or tilts her head in concentration, I catch glimpses of Megan in her features, the shape of her eyes, the curve of her cheek, genetic echoes that can't be erased. But these physical resemblances are surface deep only in all the ways that matter. In her joyful approach to life, her genuine affection for others, her open and trusting nature. She couldn't be more different from her mother. That's the strange thing about family. Sometimes the people who should love you the most are the ones who hurt you the worst. And sometimes the family you build from the ashes of betrayal is stronger than the one you were born into. This hard-won wisdom has reshaped my understanding of what family truly means. Blood relationships carry weight, but they aren't guarantees of love or safety or belonging. True family is defined by actions, by choices made daily to protect and nurture and support one another. The bonds we forge through crisis, between my children and their cousin, between my brother and my husband, between all of us who stood together against a threat we never expected, have a strength that comes from being tested and proven. We chose each other again and again when it would have been easier to retreat into self-protection. We prioritized love over fear, connection over isolation, hope over bitterness. And in doing so, we created something that transcends traditional definitions of family, a community of care built on a foundation of shared experience and mutual commitment. I don't know if Megan will ever truly recover or if she'll spend the rest of her life in institutions. I don't know if she'll ever understand the damage she caused or feel genuine remorse for her actions. Part of me hopes she does, if only for Lily's sake. These are questions without answers, uncertainties we've learned to live with. Megan's future remains a variable outside our control. Whether treatment will eventually allow her some measure of stability, whether she will ever develop the capacity for empathy that would allow true understanding of the harm she caused, whether she will remain a danger to others or find some path to redemption. I've made peace with not knowing, with focusing instead on what I can control, creating a safe and loving environment for my children, supporting my brother as he raises Lily, maintaining the boundaries necessary to protect our family from further harm. And yes, sometimes I do hope for Megan's recovery, not out of forgiveness or a desire for reconciliation, but because someday Lily will ask questions about her mother, will seek to understand her own history. Having a mother who found her way to genuine remorse and healing would be easier for Lily to process than the alternative. But I do know this. No matter what happens, no matter what new challenges come our way, we'll face them together. As a family, the family we chose, not the one that tried to destroy us. This is the certainty I hold on to, the foundation that supports everything else. We have been tested in fire and emerged stronger, more resilient, more aware of both our vulnerability and our strength. We understand now that safety isn't guaranteed, that love sometimes requires fierce protection, that family is defined by actions rather than blood. These are difficult lessons purchased at tremendous cost, but they have equipped us to move forward with clear eyes and open hearts. Whatever the future holds, whether Megan remains institutionalized or someday re enter society, whether new threats emerge or old wounds reopen, we will navigate it together, drawing on the bonds we forged through adversity, not just surviving, but thriving, not just enduring, but growing, not just a collection of individuals connected by circumstance, but a true family chosen and cherished and committed to one another's well being. If this confession kept you hooked, make sure to subscribe, like, and share. We share powerful true stories every day that explore the complex realities of life.